We were deceived. This story contains disturbing content. Viewer discretion is advised. The broadcast was sent out on the 23rd of March, 2025. It happened at the same time worldwide. After the initial shock, it was greeted across the globe with happiness and joy. Peaceful aliens had discovered our world and wanted to assist us in cleaning our broken, polluted planet. They came on ships with technology that greatly surpassed our own, in every form, landed and begun their work. Few, if any, dared to protest, before half turned to the aliens' greatest supporters, and the others simply disappeared. Politicians and celebrities all wanted to meet and be photographed with the aliens. There were accusations of politicians' knowledge of them before they became known to the public. There was no escaping the aliens on social media. No matter where you looked, there were videos or stories inspired by them. Even if you decided to go outside and touch grass in the real world, it didn't matter. Their mist-like machines could be seen in the sky, day or night, giving the planet a vivid purple color, overtaking both day and nighttime. No matter where you were in the world, the faint rumbling of the machines was constant, and a reminder of their presence on our planet. It became normal. Any complaints or concerns were met with replies of, "They're part of our sentient family," or "They're here for our own good," or even more suspicious to me, "Don't say anything or you'll cause a fuss." I wouldn't consider the aliens' control over the planet to be simple drama. Due to chemicals in the air, we were told to stay in our homes in case it made us sick. Farms brought all their animals inside big barns, and many places became deserted, except for solitary drones flying through the streets, with reminders that the smoke was temporarily toxic and to stay inside at all costs. I don't know whether the military or other government agencies were deployed to retake the planet. All I can tell you is what I saw inside my isolated town. Pets changed toward us. I saw dogs who adored and protected their families, now seeing them as strangers, some even needing to be kept away from the family. Their agitated barks and other animal yowls heard throughout the homes. Sometimes they went silent, and other times families would release them outside to stop the dogs becoming violent, only to hear the familiar bark and see a friendly wag of the tail at the back door. It would change to a whimper before it would pass against the door, lifeless and with vacant eyes. Brave souls would venture out to retrieve their pets, only to be affected by the same toxic smoke, and they would collapse to the ground, their bodies twisting into inhuman shapes and locking in place. Dead. We were not permitted out of our homes to retrieve our dead, nor to get more food. Whatever food you had in your home is what you were left with. Some families did not suffer, while others did. Families starved in their homes, and their starvation slowed through eating the sickly members of their family. Not all households suffered alone. They would share canned goods across balconies, working out how much exposure was tolerable. Other forms of infrastructure began to fail. Electricity would come on for an hour a day. And finally, not at all. The houses were dark at night. Outside it was silent. No insects nor birds. The fields I saw from my window went untended, and soon became a barren wasteland. None of the dead were buried nor any rites done for them. They were simply left to rot. There was a hidden resistance building. Signs of revolution were held up at windows and plots were made. Old tunnels used in the past were utilized once more to transport supplies, and for the moment, the aliens didn't realize the resentment building. Desperate families left their homes with their hands up in surrender, their frail bodies barely able to move, and some were taken by the aliens into floating vehicles, never to return to their homes. Others were left to die in their backyards. Some lamented their passing, and for others it was a blessing from their hunger. I grew skinny. My grandparents had suffered food shortages during World War II and the Great Depression. They got inventive, but we survived. One day, the purple smoke and the rumble of the machines were gone. People left their homes and were able to breathe. The air had never been so pure. so clean. All surviving families were left packages of food. They resembled protein bars. Some of the flavors were a strange mixture. It returned our health to us, and soon, we became healthy once more. The world's population was brought down to drastic levels. News traveled slowly. Most of the cities had been cleared of 90% of their population, and had become mass ghost cities. There were stories of strange, new beasts roaming through that had made the cities their homes. Few dared to venture there. The remaining pets who were kept safe by their owners returned to their old selves. Starving livestock made their way into the lush pasture, and unfortunately, many became sickly because of the newfound richness. We thought all signs of the aliens were gone. They cleaned up, destroyed humanity, and caused us to restart in many ways, all except for an intricate and large circular stone design in Death Valley. Inside it were standing stone tablets with writing no one could understand. There were 9 of them. It was hard to see from the grainy pictures I saw, but it looked like it was a landing site for more spacecraft. There were people who saw the aliens as saviors, gods who had helped us when we were unable to manage the planet, and then we were punished for our ways. They were determined to live more in line with the Earth's needs than their own. There were others who wanted to protect the human race at all costs. They lived underground, worked on developing weapons and defenses in relative secrecy in order to protect their goals. Me, personally, I just wanted to survive. I didn't care about the politics, the aliens, and my family dwindled to a few members. The survivors pulled together to make agricultural societies. Most technology faded before not working anymore, and there were some who were grateful for this. I like to remember and scavenge from the old world. On the ground I saw parts of one of the machines that pushed toxins into our atmosphere. Trash. Waste. In the same way they criticized and tortured us for. Still, these parts were valuable, and I began pulling pieces apart for the scrappers. I put all the heavy pieces I could carry on my shoulders and in my well-worn backpack before making the slow trek into the makeshift marketplace. I could smell the food cooking, the sound of bartering, and I made my way through. I got a decent number of food and lodging tokens. I wouldn't have to go out and look for more scrap for a couple of weeks. However, I knew I'd be out there again the next morning. I curled up in bed, wrapped the blankets around me when I heard the loud, ever so familiar sirens playing around me. I covered my ears, screamed in frustration, and shook my head. The aliens had returned. The large spaceship landed where the stone circles were, as expected. The doors were lowered, and for the first time, we were able to see the aliens who destroyed and saved our world. They didn't look like the stereotypical grey aliens we were used to seeing. They resembled raptors. Their clawed feet tapped against the metal surface as they made their way down. Each one had a different coloring and patterns on their feathering. Brighter colors for the males and more earthy tones for the females. Their fangs were painted in bright, near-gaudy shades. Their clothing looked to be made of coarse plant fibers, twisted into diagonal designs. A floating orb alongside them, with a polished robotic voice, and an image of a humanoid woman with a smile. The aliens' voices were raspy and harsh, yet it was a clear language with structure. I wonder what our voices and languages sounded like to them.
Greetings, Protectorates. We are pleased to see you have been compliant with the regulations we have put forward for your species. Ensure you follow these for your own good.
The voice was dripping in condescending professionalism. I felt my fists instinctively clench, and I purposely released them. Public displays of defiance would not serve me well. Some people around me looked concerned. Others tried to hide behind fake, bright smiles. And others, the most devout, dropped to their knees, thanking their overlords repeatedly for saving them. aiding us, as though the genocide and destruction didn't happen.
We ask you to stay behind the highlighted line. Do not move unless you are asked to, and be kind to our visitors.
Visitors? With that, humankind became aware of some of the aliens that shared our universe. Some resembled humans mutated for a millennia. Others had plant ancestry. Some, I'm sure, were machines, and others beasts from Earth, and those who were beyond human understanding. They descended down the ramp, making a variety of sounds in fascination at the new toy they had all discovered. At first they were merely curious about us, whispering and talking amongst themselves.
Human female in pink jacket and jeans. Number 10298739190324. Please step forward to be examined by our esteemed visitors.
No one spoke up for her. No one defended her. And I too was silent. She took a frightened step forward, visibly shaking, and stood with her gaze at the ground. I can't imagine what was running through her mind at the time. At first, the variety of alien species studied her, commenting on her hair and skin. One pushed back her hoodie to reveal her face. They moved forward, becoming more demanding now with their touching, and lifted her hair, tugged sharply on it. They stopped, then pulled hard enough to pull the hair from her skull. She whimpered and stood trembling. It only got worse. They pinched and pulled on her skin, forced her lips up into a wide, inhuman smile, tearing the corners of her mouth. Some of the other humans tried to step back to leave, perhaps out of shame, or to preserve whatever dignity the woman still retained.
Please do not leave the site until you've been given permission to do so.
The same voice rang out. Death would be the result, I was sure. Their handling of her became even more violent. Most of her hair had been yanked out. Their version of fingers plunged into her eyes, resulting in her screaming for them to stop. Our alien protectors did nothing. All except watch with parted lips and a hungry look in their eyes. Soon her clothing was torn and burned off her body, then her skin, and then her organs lay on a pile on the floor. The aliens looked around at each other, before jumping on the spot and showing other signs of sadistic delight. One, a child alien, came forward and trailed a finger on the flesh and ate it. I looked at the humans around me. They were numb, broken, and waited for whatever pleasure our masters wanted of us. I wish I had found somewhere to hide in the hills. Even if I was rounded up and killed, it would have been better than being here. The aliens were talking among themselves before saying something to our hosts. We couldn't understand them. Was that better or worse? I don't know.
Could the following humans please step forward? Man with black jacket and jeans, number 9193043092. Woman with the red shirt and shorts, number 0210298802. And could the child in green, number 202010239. Please step forward.
The man turned to his wife, kissed her cheek, and gently pushed her off him when she tried to stop him. He hushed her, worried she too would suffer the grisly fate, and obediently stepped forward. The woman did so, yet she was alone. Her family had been purged when the aliens first destroyed our world. Finally, the little girl let out a tragic sob, and her parents pleaded with the aliens. Not her. Take one of them. Anyone but her.
Child in green, number 202010239, needs to step forward. Please step forward now.
The parents sobbed and held their daughter. I couldn't hear what they were saying to her anymore. I tried to block it out. Someone else from the crowd acted, took the little girl from their arms, and pushed her toward the aliens. Maybe he had saved all our lives. I don't know. People grumbled and glared at him, angry and riddled with shame. The parents sat on the floor, wailing, and couldn't watch what happened next. The aliens were interested in the suffering of my kind, curious, fascinated, and clearly we were the source of their amusement. The three stood in the entrails of the woman's body. It was still warm.
The selected 3 are to enter the spacecraft.
This wasn't the first time it had happened. They usually didn't take anyone. We were mostly silent. There were murmurs of where were they taking them and what would happen. Our reactions were studied, and as the 3 chosen walked towards the ramp, their fate unknown. None of them looked back as they walked up the ramp. I expected the aliens to leave now. They took what they wanted from us, and yet their sport was not yet complete. Our destroyers moved between us and their guests. Sharp animal sounds that reminded me of a bird sound crossed with a dog's bark. Their movements were jerky. Their toe claws tapped maliciously, and I could have sworn I saw fear in their eyes. Their clawed fingers tapped buttons on their wrists. A neon green shield appeared, and it was now I realized they were defensive.
Please make sure you stay behind the line and follow all instructions put forward to you.
The guests panicked and the human crowd changed. I'm not sure what caused it. I realized it had been a trap. They drew out makeshift weapons, knives, and even some of the few guns available. The humans attacked with what they had, taking the aliens by surprise.
Disobedience will be punished.
The robotic voice was dark. It repeated several times before a stray bullet and the strike of a sword silenced it. The image of the wound flickered before it stopped. I want to say I joined in with the valiant attempt to defy them. Yet I hadn't survived this long by putting myself in harm's way. I lowered myself down, stepped or crawled over the dead and the dying, alien or human. All I wanted was to get to safety. There was a loud booming sound followed by fire. Someone launched a weapon with a degree of firepower and it caused an explosion. I couldn't help but smirk when I heard the terrified sounds of the aliens, who all fled up into the ship, and it did not take long before it took off into the atmosphere, with the 3 humans on board. No one knew their fate. Given what had happened, it was unlikely to be a pleasant one. There were no immediate attacks nor signs of retribution. People hid in the caves or other isolated areas for some time. The wait is torturous. I hid among them before I drifted away. There was both safety in numbers. However, large groups would also place a target on your back. The weather changed, becoming colder, drier, and the crops and animals that survived began to suffer. I watched as farmers held the dry husks in their hands and sobbed. Animals walked around with their ribs protruding from their sides, trying to find whatever remnants of grass or grain still remained. They were slaughtered to preserve their meat, salted and stored in hopes of better times to come. The sky darkened. The communities that had come together in unity began to turn on each other, in hopes of securing whatever few resources remained. I hid away. It was hard not being able to trust anyone, and I did what I could to help smaller family groups. I had a feeling it was all part of the aliens' vengeance. It was confirmed when I saw lights in the sky. Electricity is rare, only used occasionally, and it tended to act as a beacon for anyone wanting to steal resources. The lights were consistent before flashing a couple of times, and then they disappeared. The machines became increasingly common. The more the human population suffered, the more the machines were seen. Any defiance and we would be punished. I can't tell you how long it has been since they first appeared as our pretend saviors. There are far fewer humans now. I used to hear or see them on the road regularly. We carefully check each other and perhaps talk or exchange information or perhaps barter. Now, I don't see anyone anymore. Only the rotting corpses and skeletons left on the ground through murder or the long suffering effects of starvation. I have a cough that never leaves. My body is riddled from scars and damage from a lack of nutrition. But at least I'm alive. It is a lonely world. In my wanderings I look up at the night sky, and for once it is perfectly clear. I can see the light of the moon and the stars. My heart fills with hope, and perhaps there's a chance to rebuild humanity once more. Until I saw the spaceship descend again. The Forgotten Tomb. Audio recording number 1. I have been researching forgotten places and relics of the past for all of my life. Since childhood, I sat listening to the old recordings of the legends and wondered how many of them were actually true. Were these leaders unwise psychopaths? Was this war because of resources? Or some leaders' injured pride? I started studying whatever information I could find on the network. Extinct plants and animals, cultures that were no more. The world before seemed so rich and vibrant, compared to our technology in isolation from what remained of the natural world. A place too dangerous for a majority of us to step foot in. I don't think anyone has even touched the dirt for over 50 years. To think people actually used to live on the ground instead of hover homes is pretty unbelievable. The network has information on everything we need. Many of the old holograms get static and suddenly jump to the next part. I'd watch the purple figure, probably based on some former employee or perhaps even historical figure. Most I don't even remember anymore. I've never been good at reading faces. Censorship is a common part of our education, and for people like myself, it only served to make us more curious about what they were hiding from us. There are rumors you can connect to something else, and it shows everything unfiltered. Unfortunately, I don't and will probably never have the clearage for it. After the Third World War, much of the technology and cities of old were completely destroyed. Or so we have been told. I think remnants remain and they hide pieces of it from us. Maybe there are people who live underground, or perhaps in the rubble. Animals mutated or lost to time. Entire worlds we are completely cut off from. I don't know. It's fun to think about. I still think they hide it all from us. Why? I'm not sure. Maybe it is for the best. The council then decided, after this world war, to turn humanity into a monolith. There were too many things separating us. Culture, religion, anything that divided us had to go. One country, one government. Relics from this time period, and the ancient times before, are utterly expensive. You could say they are priceless. Not only are they precious for the financial gain, but also the cultural one. Anyone who is able to find any relics gets their name in the Hall of Records. Someday, I swear, my name will be in there and I will be famous. Audio recording number 2. I heard something absolutely fascinating from a friend who heard about an old tomb protected by a group of knights. From what he said is to keep people away. In fact, it is one of several, and from what I can tell, there are many different orders of knights or priests, I think. I think they're in charge of protecting the site. Some of the information has been difficult to understand, because they're written in one of the lost languages. I've been researching the different types of knights. Some of them are later orders and others are so damn ancient. I wanted to try to find secret orders from the old world, so I went into the library. You can tell how much traffic these places get, and I was the only person to come here in months. I opened up a few holograms to get a feel for it. I was looking up the sources to make sure it was credible. There were some scholars, but other names were classified with a level 5 clearance. That was usually what people who worked for the council attained. Either way, I tapped it and opened it. As I was listening, minding my own business, when the AI program kept prying to find out where this sudden interest in knights came from. I told it that it is part of my expanded studies, and it expected me to research different topics. I think it might be monitoring me now. There is always a slight delay when I connect to a new hologram or try to speak to my friends. I'm going to need to be careful, but so far, I found several different orders that were protected one item or another. Some of them were created when the religions of the world were outlawed. Therefore, any remnants were forced to go underground. An acquaintance's mother was found with an old family Bible in her possession. Later on, she, disappeared. Why would a group based on superstition guard treasure? Unless it was valuable. I think I'm on the right track. I'm going to waste some time and look at celebrity holograms and wait it out. Audio recording number 3. Finally! It took forever for the AI to assess and decide I wasn't a threat to the NWO. I hate when this happens. I wasted months for it waiting to clear so I could keep researching. I noticed that even the surveillance systems were focused on me more than usual. When I found it, it was by chance. I found something that looks to be the tomb of someone in power. There are old scans done every 15 to 20 years of the cities and the world down below, just to see if there are any issues or tectonic movements. Something along those lines. But there's a consistent marker near a mountain that hasn't changed. I don't know exactly what it could be, but there is definitely something there. It was a square room, with a long passageway, that looked like it was sealed multiple times. It could be another pharaoh's tomb, but I'm not sure what old world country it is over. I've found something incredible. I know it. It is weird. If I get caught looking, I'll get in trouble. But now I know something is there, I can report it. The system is weird, and it doesn't really make sense to me. They want you to find things but not get caught in the process. Maybe it is to find people who are skilled or driven? I have no idea. Audio recording number 4. I think I've gathered up enough information about the tomb. I'm nervous that it is enough, and not too much for them to go through. What if someone tries to steal my work? I swear, if someone tries to take this from me, I will mess them up. I filled in the government form with the information that I found, and I've applied for funding. It might not be right to do both these things at once, but I don't care. Fingers crossed that I get it or some kind of scholarship. Financial aid, that sort of thing. If I can get access to some other files, I'll be able to work it out. Ooh, perhaps even I'll be able to go to the site itself and see things happen. I know, I'm getting ahead of myself. But I've already picked out my gown for the dinner that I'll have with the council. It cost a considerable amount of credits, but once I gain the wealth from the find, it will be smooth sailing, so to speak. Whatever that means. From what I've seen, it has been approved, but the final parts need to be assessed. I've received holograms from professors who express interest in my project, and there is always a chance I will get a full ride education-wise. That means I'll be able to work for the council, and my life will be perfect. I should find out in a couple of months whether or not I got it. I can't sleep because it is so exciting. I keep checking my messages all the time. Okay, I need to log off now. Audio recording number 5. Yes! Yes, it happened! I didn't believe we would actually get funding for this. From what I can tell, I will be given a salary, and there'll be researchers and other workers who will follow my orders. I wish I had the clearance in order to tell my family about it. They would be so incredibly proud of me for this achievement. I had to lie and tell them I was going to go study, and they didn't question it. Come to think more about it, I've heard this excuse being used before by some people. One got to move to the capital city and now are so wealthy. Now that's going to be me. Okay, I need to stay focused. I thought it would take years worth of trying to get the council to see the benefit in digging up things from the past. I've also managed to decipher some of the symbols outside and research some of the rumors associated with it. A lot of symbols changed meaning as society was destroyed or were completely forgotten. Anyway, it is rumored to be the grave of a pirate king or perhaps some kind of warlord. What information we have about the place is from the year 2023 and it is minimal, as though they wish to keep the location a secret and that it wasn't common knowledge, at least for a majority of the population at the time. Only a few traces of information could be found on the old internet about it. The hope is whatever treasure is found there will fund further projects for the NWO and the council. Personally, I want this because it'll be one of the greatest archaeological discoveries of all time. No one will forget my name. I'm going to be famous and wealthy. Okay, I can't think of anything more to say. Audio recording number 6. It has been over a year since we arrived at the site, and the reason I've been quiet for so long is that our devices were monitored heavily. I couldn't even turn it on without permission, and then I had to have someone standing beside me. Fortunately, I now have the clearance I need to make whatever notes I want, but I still can't use my messaging system. I guess they don't want us traced to this location, and I don't want anyone to steal this from me anyway. There were a few strange beeping sounds when we got closer to the site. I asked the headman, basically the expedition's babysitter, what it meant. He frowned, took some kind of tablet and told us everything was going to plan. Again, as I've said before, it looks as though the people of the old world tried to keep this away from the majority of their population. It's far from any cities or signs of civilization, at least from the scans, probably to prevent looting or something. The area is also pretty stable when it comes to tectonic plate movements, and probably why the tomb has been damaged over time. I still can't believe how many resources were used to seal it up. My team has done an extensive amount of research, and it has taken nearly a year to complete. I believe we found the easiest way to get inside. Unfortunately, the old internet mainframe had so much information on it that it could be difficult to sift through it all. You had to be careful of fake information or old world government propaganda. People used to post so much ridiculous content. Anyway, we got what we needed. I still can't believe I have a team of researchers who work for me now. And I even have someone to go get me my stimulants and deliver any food I want. Audio recording number 7. I think we have the location of the treasure. The information on this place is found in most government archives. It is as though the governments of old wanted us to know about it, but not to go near it. Either way, this day will go down in history. Legally, I can't reveal the location, even in these recordings, without risking my funding. But I will say, it is located deep inside a mountain and appears to be well fortified. Strange, considering a dead person and treasure is supposed to reside inside. They must have been incredibly wealthy to afford all this being done for them. There are layers upon layers of thick reinforced concrete, and what I believe are warning signs for people to stay away. No such luck. None of us are controlled by superstitious nonsense. Some of the translations say words like danger and go back in different languages. Unfortunately, a lot of the signs have been damaged over time by the weather. Some have rusted, and none of this is going to slow us down. We all have our eye on the prize. I can't wait to have an easy life. Audio recording number 8. We have begun trying to clear a way through. The machines are so loud. The large circular doors must have been welded shut to prevent people from entering. From what I saw in the scans, there are at least 3 of these massive doors between us and the inner sanctum. Can you imagine the disappointment if all this turned out to be was an elaborate prank by some rich asshole? Whoever it was made sure to keep it as tightly sealed as possible. You should have heard all the crude jokes from the cyborg workers who are working on breaking through. They're so rough. I think we're on the right course. In a couple of months we should be close enough to the inner sanctum to start running tests and possibly getting to see what's inside with a drone. It's finally happening. The cyborg workers have been complaining about feeling sick the closer they get to the inner sanctum. Even with their strong metallic limbs, the work is difficult, and non-cyborgs physically can't do this kind of work. I'm a little worried about one of them in particular. I think he might actually die. The on-site doctor told us they were just slacking off, and just needed to take some pills to give them energy. I noticed all the doctors and the headman were starting to take pills all the time. They've also started wearing masks. They told me that their implants are different from mine and the other researchers, and therefore breathing could be difficult for them. I thought this was strange. Wouldn't they have the best money could buy? I'm nervous about this, but I can't let either thing get in the way of what will be the greatest discovery of our time. Audio recording number 9. We're getting closer. I can feel it. I can't wait for us to be able to enter the inner sanctum. Not even the headaches that I've been having will pull me away from my goal. I feel a sharp pain around my eyes, and it just doesn't stop. It's probably from all the stress I've been under. One of the doctors gave me a pill and told me it will soothe the headaches I've been having. So far, it's been working, so I guess there is nothing to worry about. I received a hologram call today to tell me I'm gaining the favor of the council. If I keep going and I'm successful, there's a chance for me to work on more projects for them. I'm so excited. Oh, also, the workers who were sick before were taken off site. I've been told they've been taken to a makeshift medical facility further away. I hope they'll be okay. The headman told me they'll be back before I know it. Audio recording number 10. I didn't think they were real. I thought they were a myth or had gone extinct in the religious purges over 100 years ago. During the night we were attacked by a group of 10 men and 3 women. The knights tried to stop us from continuing our work. They weren't dressed like medieval knights or anything. I could have sworn they were workers, not cyborgs, but even lower. I couldn't make out what they said when they called out to us, before they opened fire on us with guns. And even swords. I didn't even think these weapons even existed anymore. I don't know what language they were speaking as they were trying to hurt or kill us. 2 of the workers died on sight. It was terrifying. I still can't believe they were actually real. While the attack happened, I hid in a lab with some other researchers and waited until we heard it was safe. The headman came in and told me it was safe and wouldn't happen again. He wasn't shaken or upset. I could see their blood on his face and it scared me. As you can tell from this message, they failed, fortunately for us, and I walked up to one of the knights. He was a middle-aged man and didn't have his implants like he was supposed to. Why would you want to live without the advantages? He looked up at me, and I felt a pang of guilt. He had really gentle-looking eyes and wasn't the monster I thought he was. He pleaded with me to close it up before it's too late, that we can't unleash this evil on the world, that there was still time to stop it. I leaned down and asked him what evil he meant. He tried to tell me but died before he could. I looked down at him and saw a strange symbol on his chest. The circle with 3 half triangles. It was familiar. I think I saw it on some of the walls of the tomb. I watched him die. As I walked, I saw the rest of the bodies. I felt something in my stomach that this was wrong. I've never seen corpses before today. I kept thinking of them staring up at me with their vacant eyes. The headman told me they were a highly superstitious order, devoted to bring humanity back to the Dark Ages. The doctors took the bodies away to deal with them. I watched them take them further away and couldn't stop thinking about it. Fortunately, I had the upcoming prize to focus on, and I hate saying it, but I couldn't shake an uneasy feeling. Audio recording number 11. I'm on site. We are so close to the inner sanctum now. The walls are much thicker and they're made of a different material this time. The normal tools aren't working, so the workers have recommended using a new form of laser in order to get in. We had to get approval from the council in order to use it, but it was quickly approved. One of the workers told us we should be careful using this technology, but no one listened to him. If it misfired, it could cause problems. The headman told us it would be happening. No one was able to challenge that direct order. I don't care. Someone had to be the voice of reason and tell everyone to push on with it. The symbol remains the same, despite having different languages around it. There are several ones. Let me get a better look at them. There is one with a circle in the center and surrounded by 3 half triangles, the same one I saw the knights wearing. I found another one, and there is a small circle inside a larger circle, and then has 3 half circles. Then there is a pirate-looking one, but so far, no one has found any treasure that we can use. No gold, no gems. The corridors of the tomb have been surprisingly bare. I'm just hoping everything is stored inside. We haven't managed to decipher the other symbols or the words yet. Since many of the old world's languages disappeared, only a few scholars are able to understand it, and none of them are here. The laser is being used tonight. I'll let you know how it went. We will be inside by tomorrow. Audio recording number 12. We did it. The laser worked and it misfired. All that was inside were rows and rows of sealed metal drums. Some had been leaking out, and nearly instantly most people became sick, especially those who didn't have enough access to the tablets, or the masks, or strange suits. I think the tablets protected me a little bit, but not enough. The people of the old world didn't want this to be released again. The use of the laser made it even hard to seal it back up. I've been getting sick and my condition has been deteriorating rapidly. The on-site doctors haven't told me what's wrong, but I have a feeling it is the same thing that the cyborg workers got. I'm not dying much quicker than they are. I can't explain the amount of pain I'm in right now. Every part of my body hurts. None of the implants are working to prevent whatever is happening to me. Is this some kind of new disease or virus? All of them have been eliminated. I've sent holograms to my family to tell them I'm not going to make it. I haven't heard anything back from them. Surely they would want to say goodbye. Surely the council would let me say goodbye. My skin has started to peel off. My hair has fallen out in clumps. I can't keep any food or water down. I know I'm going to die. The doctors refuse to answer my questions about why this happened and who exactly approved this. I went from being praised and listened to being ignored and spoken over, as though I'm not even in the room or have any say in my own treatment. When they do speak to me, they keep telling me that everything will be alright and to try to take things slowly. I know I'm being lied to. I suspect they knew what was inside. Why would they let us proceed with it if they knew this would happen? They used me to get what they wanted. I've overheard them a few times when they think I'm sleeping. The radiation has spread, and the laser caused it to be pushed out around the world. It has spread to several harbor cities, and there has been many deaths. They have tried sealing it. I saw rows of people bringing supplies up to try to seal it. The dead are left where they fell. It doesn't matter to them how many people are going to die in the process. I doubt the council or any of the council's families will be forced to do it. I can't believe I was so damn foolish. I've been taken to a medical facility. I don't know where I am. Audio recording number 13. Forgive me for the change in my voice. I need to rest my throat, so all this is using the female AI, Clarence. I'm hooked up to her so she can record my thoughts. Soon, I won't be able to speak at all. I know what it is now. I don't know why the test results didn't warn us what we were walking into. It was a stockpile of nuclear waste. The nightly order was created to prevent mankind from going down there to open it up. They're still trying to reseal the bunker, but the damage done has caused so much death and destruction. Already the climate has changed. Even our technology isn't enough to prevent it from spreading. The doctors knew what was happening, but the bastards wanted to study the impact on the human body. Even with all the genetic assistance and the implants, it didn't stop it from working. I'm being kept alive for them to study what is going to happen. I hear them sometimes talk about harvesting my DNA, because I lasted far longer than the others. I've pleaded with them to kill me. Do what they want with my body, but don't let me live like this. I got what I wanted. My name is known throughout history. I am the person who destroyed the world. Everything is outlawed. This story contains disturbing content. Viewer discretion is advised. The day drawled on. It was freezing cold. I shivered and tightened my jacket around me. Patches had been sewn over the holes from wear and tear. Again and again. New clothing was a luxury for the elite. Second-hand was for the middle class. And everyone else kept reusing whatever they had. Who thought in 10 years everything would have changed? In an attempt to stop or slow down global warming, a new chemical was dispersed into the atmosphere. For the last 5 years, there has been little sunlight. Many of the farms and ecosystems had begun to collapse, and that caused massive food shortages. The weather was colder, and soon many industries began to shut down. The resource wars had been in progress for many years, and so the world changed. Wars over water, farming land, and dwindling resources. First, it was oil, and extended to others. Most people were unaware of it happening until it finally reached their doorstep. I rubbed under my eyes with my sleeve. So far, I've been waiting over an hour for the food line to move forward. In every city across the country, there were food shortages and government-sanctioned rationing. I never thought there would be a black market for baked beans. I heard a truck drive past and saw several large trucks, guarded by armed soldiers. The food trucks were reserved for the government and probably their families. I could hear people around me grumbling, glaring at the trucks, but no one dared to do anything about it. Society had become increasingly unstable. The line slowly crept forward, and each time, I'm worried the infamous close sign would appear, and we would be forced to leave empty-handed. So far, so good. There were only 3 people ahead of me, and I could see the bags of food. My stomach grumbled at the sight. I got to the start of the queue, and an exhausted-looking woman greeted me with a tired smile of recognition. "Hello, could I see your ID and your allotment card?" she asked, the dark circles under her eyes, hollow cheeks and marked skin, revealed she had survived one of the many illnesses going around at the time. I took my well-worn ID and my allotment card out, handed it to her, and she looked it over. I worried there'd be some new policy that would deny me food, but these fears were for nothing when she handed it back to me, lifted the bag, and said, "Good luck. This is your last bag for the next month." I took the bag and didn't bother to look at it. You got what you were given, and you were grateful for it. I lifted it up and held it close to my chest as I walked home. There was no way I was going to let someone take this from me. I walked home and wish I asked some people to come with me. I remembered when I used to have to worry about someone trying to steal my money, which was now worthless, and any valuable items I had left. Now, all people wanted was to take your food, water, or any information that could help you get either. I hurried home. I could feel eyes on me, and fortunately no one approached me. They were all too busy trying to get out of the stinging rain. I pulled my jacket hood over my head to protect my face. I could feel the burning sensation on my hands, and I couldn't do anything about that. My younger brother greeted me at the door. He was taller than me now, and was probably hungry. We were all always hungry. He looked in the bag, and we entered the small apartment we had been allocated after our house in the suburbs had been claimed for the hard-working troops and their families. I've always supported the armed forces and the sacrifices they made for our country, but how our government went about all of this was so incredibly dirty. My parents sat at the tiny kitchen table with a newspaper between them. Like everyone else, they would have been looking at the employment section, desperate for some kind of work that would help us. They didn't even look up at me. My brother put the bag on the kitchen table and started taking the canned goods out. I haven't seen fresh fruit or vegetables for years. The apartment was run down when we got here. There were cracks in the walls revealing the brickwork. One of the cupboards had its door taken off. The tiles were damaged and it was overall in poor repair. We tried to make it a home. We covered the damaged parts, put up little paintings, and it was still a far cry from the home we used to have before. Electricity was rare now. For people like myself, it only came on during set time periods during the day. And once that was done, that was it. No more. At night time we would freeze. And during one particularly bad night, there were reports of people dying of the cold in their homes. This nearly caused a riot that was only silenced by armed police, threats to deny us electricity and food, and most people complied to go back to their homes. That was when the pamphlets started. Families with elderly or sick family members were encouraged with the promise of higher food tokens to deliver them so that they could pass peacefully. Their sacrifice was for the good of the country and brighter days to come. At first, people refused, but as there were shortages of food and medicine, many elderly family members wanted to be taken to the drop-off points. The soldiers never answered what would happen to them. Years ago, I watched my grandpa get on the truck with other people He smiled at me, told me to be good, and I've never seen my parents so broken. My father changed after that. My family didn't watch while the truck drove away. I couldn't help but keep looking back as he was driven, and I hoped they were taken somewhere nice before they passed, even though I knew it was unlikely. I went out to sit on the balcony. Fortunately, it was covered so the rain wouldn't burn my skin, and looked out at the city. There were flames where people tried to light the place up, and to try to keep warm. Anything and everything was burnt. The stink of chemicals filled my nostrils, and I tried to block it out. I closed my eyes and imagined being on a small, grassy hill, with the sun on my face, and it was easy to breathe. Things could always be worse. I could have been taken to one of the camps or be on the streets. People always disappear from both of those places. I heard people fighting, yelling, babies and children crying, and the infamous security trucks driving through with the announcements. When I first heard them, it was blaring, but it had become normal. My mum called me in for dinner, and I went in for a tiny portion of food. I ate slowly and imagined more on my plate. My mum barely ate hers, and kept trying to give us some more of hers. No one accepted it, no matter how hungry we were. I went to sleep, shivering and wrapped in many blankets. We could never tell what tomorrow would bring. I woke up to a loud knocking at the front door. My dad walked over to it with a baseball bat and cautiously opened it. He saw a family, 2 dads and their children standing there. All they had were the clothes on their backs. One of them apologized to my dad and handed him a piece of paper. I could hear more commotion in the hallways, with there being a lot more people there now. This family was also allocated to live here in the apartment too. None of us were happy about this, yet it wasn't their fault. We welcomed them in and tried to make space for them. Later that night, the fighting was worse than it had been in months. We were already living in cramped conditions, only made worse by strangers moving in. Why the government had decided to displace even more people is unknown. There are rumors that the northern states are slowly being depopulated. I could hear the chatter from inside the apartment when my parents were talking to the 2 dads. I sat outside and wondered what we were going to do food-wise. How could we eat when they weren't able to? Later, I go out and try to come up with a way of getting more food. But I heard something that caused me to listen silently. One of the 2 dads told mine of a resistance movement. It was growing fast, and that we would all someday get our liberties back. My dad seemed intrigued by the motion, but my dad warned him that he has a family. If one person was convicted of a crime, the entire family was impacted by it too. I was naturally interested in this resistance movement. Who wouldn't be? A chance for our society to return to the prosperous one. I listened, and when I got a chance to speak with one of the dads, I took my chance. I asked him more about it, and he looked around to make sure we wouldn't be overheard. He told me they would be meeting down under the docks this evening, if I wanted to go with him. I debated this. Human trafficking and crime had become such a normal part of our lives. The risk hung over us like an ominous shadow. But going to the docks with a stranger I barely knew seemed foolish. Not nearly as bad as having a strange family move in against our will. Later that night, I said nothing and watched while he crept out of the apartment, down the fire escape stairs. I put the hood over my head and followed him at a distance. I followed the grey man technique as I walked through the streets. I wanted to blend in, to be forgettable. The closer I got to the docks, I could smell the foul aroma of rotting fish and polluted water. I wrinkled my nose. Years ago, the smell would have made me sick, but much like everything else, you get used to it. There were a group of gathered people standing under the docks. Legally, we were still able to go out at night and meet up with other people. Yet, this, I doubt it would have been considered to be okay. I hid behind several burnt-out barrels that smelled absolutely foul and waited. The man who I guessed was the leader was of average height. Scruffy-looking man, who was flanked by 2 men who looked to be former military. He told us the founding fathers would never have stood for this, and we needed to take our country back. He laid down plans to ensure we would have enough food and housing, that kids would go back to school and get an education again, that we'd have medicine, that we would have fresh food again. The crowd was getting excited. He asked who wanted to join the cause, and several people raised their hands. There were flashing lights, and soon they were surrounded by the military, some in uniform and others without. The would-be rebels were put into trucks, and their fates would be dark. Treason was punished severely. I hid and waited silently. I didn't want to end up on the trucks. However, that man's speech stayed with me. The lessons and teachings had left their mark. When I was sure they were all gone, I made my way home, taking the long way, and making sure no one followed me. I saw one of the dads on the couch crying. Word had already reached him about his partner. My parents were incredibly angry with me. My mum slapped me hard across the face for the first time, before she pulled me into a hard, unyielding hug while she wept. Her body rocked violently. I went to bed that night, hungry, and slept. I dreamed I was a rebel. I woke up and told my parents I would be in the markets trying to find some food, or other supplies we needed. Before everything went to shit, my parents were near enough helicopter parents, constantly looking out for me and keeping me safe. In this society, what was the point? My younger brother went to work with my father at the recycling plant. Hard work, little pay, and health issues. However, starvation was the greatest threat to us at the present. I have been asked to do some extremely disgusting things for items I used to take for granted. I watched other women accept, do the deed, and come back with the item in their hand, either numb or unable to look anyone in the eyes. Or sometimes, even worse, they'd come back empty-handed. I made my way through the streets and headed to the unofficial black market. Technically, no one had permits to sell anything, but the local government let it slide. There were people selling random items. One elderly man, no doubt a book lover in times past, had his book collection in front of him. Books were now for the elite only. His collection now would be used to start fires. Old technology, smartphones, laptops, desktops, no longer had any value. Designer or fast fashion was obsolete, the latter being a blessing on the already strained planet. People needed sturdy clothing that would last. I wanted to see if I could find some food. People's pets had long since been eaten, and some tried to release them into the wild. When food became too scarce, meat was always questionable, whether it was a rat, someone's pet, or perhaps even a human being. It was easy to just not ask questions and be thankful for having a full stomach. I smelled something warm cooking and my stomach growled. I saw a man selling unknown pieces of meat on skewers. When I asked him how much, he asked him for the rest of my food tokens and for a little fun behind his wooden cart. I suggested perhaps something else would be better. And did he need help to cook? I could do that instead. He told me he made his offer, and if I wanted the food, I would do it. I looked at the food, then back at him, then back at the food again. Already the food was desperately low. We always needed more food. I turned and walked away. Hopefully there would be another vendor I could purchase from. There was another selling some canned goods, but they were dented or bloated. I'm pretty sure a couple of them were even from the 1950s. There was no way I was going to bring those home. I wish I had paid attention to any survival tips or methods for foraging edible food. A lady was selling decent-sized bags of rice. Now this would be excellent. I ran my fingers through it and found random bits of plastic or tiny stones in it. Soon I realized it was mainly little extras to try to bulk it up. I sighed and asked her how much it was. The same ridiculous price. I asked her if I could have any bags with just rice. She shook her head and told me this was all there was. I offered her the same deal that was declined, and she agreed. I helped her sell her wares. She let me keep a quarter of the credits earned, and then sneakily gave me a small bag of pure rice hidden under the cart, clearly reserved for her prime customers. I thanked her and hid it under my jacket to make my way home. When I saw the soldiers, they were checking each of the carts for any contraband, which could mean absolutely anything these days, and the rules constantly changed. I held the bag close to my chest, breathed and kept walking straight. If you ran or acted suspiciously, it would only draw more attention to you. I walked past and tried to look natural when I felt a hand around my upper arm. I turned and looked to see a soldier's gas mask face close to mine. The soldiers never showed their faces anymore. "Stop!" His voice boomed, hostile when it didn't need to be. "Yes, sir? What's wrong, sir?" I answered politely, lowered my head, and tried to look as non-threatening as possible. "Lift up your hands. What did you buy?" he demanded. "Just some rice, sir. It's under my jacket. May I?" He opened it and pulled it from my arms. The soldier opened the bag and saw the rice. He went still. He reached out, grabbed me by my arm, and threw me down hard against the concrete. I hit my jaw and tasted blood. He and who I am guessing was his commanding officer were talking among themselves. Their heads occasionally looked in my direction, and the officer nodded, deciding my fate. The soldier lifted me up by my arm and led me to one of the infamous weathered trucks. I whimpered and pulled away from him. I've seen them countless times and never thought I'd be put inside one. "No, please," I murmured before being thrown inside. There were a couple of people in there already. Did my face match their sad, broken ones? I knew my parents would find out eventually. I looked out the back as the truck rumbled to a start. We began the drive and I glanced through the gap to see where we were going. I hadn't left the area near my apartment for a long time and was disgusted by what I saw along the roads. There were rotting bodies hanging from stripped trees and long poles with signs saying, "Treason," "Deserters," and another word I couldn't make out. The roads were lined with garbage, rusted cars, and makeshift checkpoints between different areas. I wondered what my old street now looked like. One of the soldiers must have noticed me looking out and closed the blind, making the truck completely dark inside. I don't know how long the truck drove for. One of my fellow captives relieved himself where he sat, and the place stank. I wrinkled my nose, and I imagined I was somewhere else. Anywhere else. I was back at the poolside relaxing with the smell of barbecue and the sound of my family enjoying themselves. The truck drove along a rocky road. We all bounced around inside, and my body bruised before it finally came to a jolted halt. My daydream broken. The blind was pulled open. It was dark except for the insanely bright spotlights down on us. A voice over a loudspeaker told us to get down and put our hands on our heads. I didn't wait to be yanked down and got down. My hands on my head. One of the soldiers, I'm guessing, kicked my knees out from under me to force me to kneel. I didn't say anything. I could hear the barking of dogs on tight leashes. It felt like forever I was forced to kneel, until who I'm guessing was someone in power spoke. "For crimes against the NAG, you are all condemned to 50 years of hard labor. For crimes against the NAG, you are all condemned to 50 years of hard labor. Your crimes may be reduced for compliance, newfound loyalty, and dedication to the new American government." The call came out. We were separated according to perceived gender. Soldiers with rifles watched us and took us into the medical facility, where a cold-looking doctor in a lab coat waited. We were forced to strip, and I noticed how sickly all of us were. We were gaunt. Our lack of vitamins caused old wounds to open back up again, and we were all covered in random sores. Finally, it was my turn to walk in front of everyone naked. I sat on the cold metal chair and waited while the doctor looked me over. I felt like a lab rat to be studied. The doctor asked me if I was pregnant. I said no. She asked me if I had ever been pregnant. Again, no. Then asked if I had regular periods. I said yes, so long as I was getting enough food. They scribbled down some notes. I didn't know if I just made my life easier, or if it had become much worse. I was given a folded coarse grey uniform, and I was sent to be cleaned up. Normally I would have loved to have a proper shower. However, The water was freezing, and the masked armed guards watched while I bathed. I was told to cut my own hair, and then I didn't immediately comply. They warned me someone else would do it. I started cutting off pieces of my hair with the rusty scissors. I didn't know how much time I had to get the job done. I knew it looked terrible, and I mentally tried to block it out. I was finally able to dress, and barefoot I was sent into the dorms. There were rows and rows of bunks. Some of the women looked up at me, and others were too busy keeping to themselves to react. I wandered around, unsure what to do, and overwhelmed by what was happening around me. An older woman took me under her wing and told me this facility is where they tend to keep people alive. Did you see people go on the second truck? There was no way they would survive. The labor we did was pointless and infuriating. How did us pulling apart old pieces of rope help rebuild society in any way? Or us breaking old pieces of bone? Some looked more human than animal. The work was tedious and only ended late at night. We would wait for our meal, listening to propaganda about how the NAG were going to save America, that we should be grateful they are here for us, and we have a chance to prove ourselves to them. The loudspeakers kept repeating, and we had to place our hands over our hearts and recite. We give our lives to serve the new American government. We live and die by the mercy of the new American government. We owe everything to the new American government. The new American government will be the only ones who will save us. I live to serve the new American government. The bowls of gruel and bread were brought out. We devoured the food, occasionally biting our fingers. We were so hungry. We weren't permitted to speak, but that didn't stop people from trying. People were talking about how the rebels had been taken out. On the walls, there were posters of propaganda for the NAG. I had more food security in this facility than I did at home. There had been no word about what happened to my family, and nothing about any of the other cities. Every day was the same. The monotonous lifestyle, coupled with the difficult work, caused many people to try to bond with the soldiers or swear allegiance to the NAG. Some would even turn on their fellow prisoners, even if it wasn't true, and they received better quality food or were moved to the best bunks in the facility. My thoughts were of escape. Legally, I doubted my parents could do anything about it, and I couldn't escape to go home, because if I did, I couldn't imagine the penalty for harboring a fugitive. The soldiers' helmets meant we never saw their eyes, nor their facial expressions. One of them stopped, and lingered near me a little too long. The soldiers were representatives of the NAG, and therefore were protected by the government, even if they overstepped. He greeted me with my ID number, not my name. That was never used anymore, and told me to follow him. I didn't have a choice, and went along with him into the storeroom. I faced the wall so I wouldn't have to look at him. The soldiers hated being looked at for some reason. The door closed. I heard him press some buttons, and there was a whoosh sound as the soldier took their helmet off. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a familiar face, and saw it was my younger brother, now older. He was a man and looked to be quite healthy. I stared up at his bearded face. He put a finger to his lips to encourage me to be quiet. We hugged, and it was so nice to see a friendly face. I couldn't help but hiss at him at why he joined them. He told me a lot had happened. It had indeed been years that had passed. Our parents were both dead. The other dad, the husband of the one who had been captured, had been an agent, and reported my parents for some made-up crime. They didn't know what happened to me, and believed I'd either been taken by the gangs or killed for meat. Our parents, along with others from our building, were taken and killed by firing squad. The children who remained were taken to camps, brainwashed into becoming the next generation of soldiers. There had been uprisings, and the NAG was getting worried. He told me he was getting me out of here. He wasn't sure how just yet. I nodded, and he told me to act like we had been intimate previously, the reason why I would be allocated extra food. I did so. When the other prisoners asked where I was, I told them, and no one batted an eyelid. One even suggested I do this regularly, in hopes of getting better food all the time. Maybe it had been a dream. I didn't see nor hear from him, for what I'm guessing were months, when I woke up to sirens. A loud booming voice told us we were to meet in the assembly hall, with a long line of other prisoners. I made my way there, only to be grabbed from behind with a gloved hand over my mouth. The grip was released, and I was struck by the butt of the rifle and fell to the ground. I woke up later in the back seat of a jeep. I was groggy, and looked to see who I was guessing was my brother. He sat with an unknown man. We were driving, and I took a peek out the window. We were in the desert, a sharp change in weather from the freezing temperature where we had been. It was empty, and I couldn't see people. I listened to the chatter between the two men. They talked about a place called the Refuge, and how things would change once we were there. I closed my eyes and was skeptical. I had heard the promise of change before, and received nothing. I woke up when we had arrived. They too had armed guards, but certainly lacked the cohesive uniforms the NAG soldiers had. They had old-world military uniforms, with random pieces of NAG technology, probably looted from killed soldiers. There were non-combatants around, farmers and other workers, and I recognized the suspicious look in their eyes at us. My brother got out, shook hands with someone I'm guessing had power within the settlement, and the stranger and I looked at each other awkwardly. He apologized for knocking me out, and asked if my head was alright. I told him it was, even though it still throbbed. It took me a long time to relax and come out of my shell. It had been years since I was imprisoned, and my mind still suffered. For a time, I was happy. The air out here was nice. The food was fresh, and my health greatly improved, and the socialization was pleasant. My brother and I would speak of times before things changed, the fond memories of our parents, the lives we would have lived otherwise. I began my self-defense training and learning a trade. Everyone worked in the settlement regardless of age. We were constantly on the lookout for spies or signs of NAG soldiers. Over time, we saw them less often. The word was they were too busy dealing with infighting within their organization to come after any rebels. Any of the information we received came from roaming traders who could not be relied on for truth or to protect us. We gave the impression that the Refuge was a smaller settlement than it was. We told them we were just a few families trying to make it. So far, they believed us. As expected, the peace we had here did not last long. I'm not sure how things were resolved within the NAG, but their forces became united again. We met with a group of escaped citizens who told us they wanted refuge, and naturally one was a spy. It is interesting how one person can bring down something beautiful. The soldiers raided during the night, and my brother's friend, I can't remember his name, was killed. I had to pull my brother away to stop him running over to try to save the already dead man. And we left the refuge's survivors to their fate. I'm not proud of myself, yet I had to choose survival. Surviving in the desert was difficult. My brother was particularly upset about the loss of his friend, and I hated how I couldn't help him. We wandered for a while before some caravanners took us in. They asked us prying questions about who we were, where we were from, and we tried to give them enough information to trust us, but not open us up for any revenge. For a time, we were safe, until we were picked up during the night by slavers, and taken into one of the main cities. I can't remember what it was called during the old world. The new name was Fort Dahl, and it was under the control of the NAG's favored citizens. The air was clear here. There was grass, flowers, and trees. It was beautiful. Homes were maintained and actually looked like homes rather than military camps. The people looked clean. Their clothing bright, maintained, and looked new. The women had their hair styled, and their children looked so healthy. I was brewing with envy. Everyone else struggled with the bare necessities. We were taken underground into a chamber. It was torture being out of the sunlight and being placed in a dark, dreary cell. We were left there for the night without food or water. The next morning the guards came down, stripped us, and we will check for any injuries or parasites. My brother's tattoo on his upper forearm, the two C's with a single arrow pointed upwards. The symbol of the NAG was noticed. He was taken away to be interrogated, and I hoped he wouldn't be tried as a deserter. A thick, cold metal collar was placed around my neck. I was given coarse clothing and thick wooden clogs that made loud sounds whenever I walked. There was no sneaking when I wore these. I was told to mop the floors in the communal bathrooms. Despite the painful collar and the awkward clogs, this was far better than the camp I was in years ago. I didn't think. I just did my job and mentally blocked it out. I was left alone to work. I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror. I had to be my late 20s now. Maybe even my early 30s. The last time I looked at my face, I was a teenager, and I realized I lost years of my life. I reached out and touched my face. The reflection matched my actions, and eventually, I turned away to get back to my work. I didn't see my brother. I didn't feel safe asking, instead silently listened. If I blended in, no one would notice me. Over time, I was told that if I behaved, I would be treated better. And eventually, I could be freed and allowed to live a normal life here. Our cells were all underground, mainly so the residents weren't forced to look at us and break the fantasy of their magical world where everything and everyone was happy. Months passed, the clogs on my feet were removed, and a smaller collar was worn instead. My food quality increased. During the night when the population were out for whatever social event occurred, the other enslaved people would go in, clean their homes, and disappear again. I wondered if any of them knew about us. Still, no word about my brother. I spoke to the man who I guess was in charge of those who were enslaved. He was kind to me, and would give me tips on how to improve. He did not have a name, but went by the title, First Man. I asked if he saw him. He took me aside and told me he was a deserter, and would be taken away. I told him he was my brother and the last family I had left. First Man told me he couldn't save him. He was to be executed because he had not responded to training, and therefore death was the only option. I asked if I could see him one last time, and he agreed, but just for 5 minutes. I was taken through the dark tunnels underground. I could hear muffled sound all around me, and the coughs of sickly men. I saw him. His bones poked through his skin. The muscle had completely deteriorated. His face was drawn in. He had scarring on his body that healed and then had been damaged again. Clearly his bones had been broken and reset at strange angles. We hugged, cried, and I can barely remember the conversation we had near his end. I'm just happy I was there for him. Those to be executed were taken far from the settlement, and I didn't know it had been done. I found out through gossip of the enslaved people that I had no family left. He was dead. I don't know how much time passed. In time, I was given the smallest of collars and given the most freedom. The magistrate's wife took a liking to me, and so I spent a majority of my time with her. The improved conditions and protection was a relief. Later, I was freed and worked for the wife instead. My work was reasonable, and I had considerable free time. These were the families of those who had caused my life to fall apart. I wasn't me anymore. I don't remember the name I used, and nor do I remember the name my parents called me. There were small incidents, missing items, gates that had been left open, and other smaller safety concerns. The magistrate and his wife were both becoming increasingly irritated. While there were no social movements that I knew of at the time, I knew they could also exist, and did my best to avoid anything that could jeopardize my position. I was comfortable, and as happy as I could be. Hate or judge me all you want, but those things were a rarity. The incidents gradually became worse, and I discovered the source of the issues. I found some newer people were determined to cause damage. I don't know what order or group they were, or if they simply wanted to create chaos. They reported me to First Man. And so I was taken back underground, where I was being held when I first came here. I shivered and all the painful memories returned to me. I was taken into a room with no light. I don't know how long I was in there. No food, no water. All my memories blurred into one, and I saw my family speaking to me. I longed to join them. They reached out to me with their hands, their faces twisted, and my head swam. I was asked again to tell them what I knew. I don't know them. And the thick iron door closed again. It remained shut until the magistrate came in with soldiers. Their helmets hid their humanity, and he warned me that his wife's favor would not protect me if I didn't tell them what I knew. I told him that I didn't know anything. My brother's past dealings came back to haunt me. He plied one fingernail off at a time, the reason why they don't grow properly. I remember screaming, and now his bloodlust was up. It was difficult to hold him back. I don't know what he used. Something was shoved into my eye. The pain was incomparable, and soon I saw nothing out of it. I couldn't stop screaming as he yelled at me, demanding to know what I knew, and how dare I betray them after they had given me freedom. I swore repeatedly that I didn't know again and again. His voice changed, and the realization I wasn't lying must have set in. He didn't apologize. With nothing to say, he left me bleeding and alone in a cell. I was numb. I didn't speak when a nurse came and tended to my wounds. No matter what happened, I would always be an outsider here, and I'd have to make my own way. I'd never be one of them. No one apologized. I was taken back up and put on bed rest. My eye was gone, and the magistrate's wife gave me a beautiful leather eye patch that would have cost a good amount of credits. It covered the wound her husband devastated my face. I kept doing my duty, smiled, and was ever obedient and grateful. My opportunity to escape came when the guilty ones struck at the leadership when I was there. They came in with guns drawn, ready. They planned this incredibly well during the changeover of the soldiers, and when the magistrate couple would both be alone. I got into an argument with them. They asked if I wanted to protect the people who killed my brother, who destroyed America, who ruined my eye and stole my life from me. They told me of a future where there would be no NAG, and there would be peace. There was no choice now. I accepted the offered knife. I felt a pang of guilt in my heart when I took the magistrate's wife by her clean, well-groomed hair and tilted her head back to expose her soft throat. She had been kind to me, rescued me even. It wasn't enough. I couldn't make out what she was murmuring, pleading, and I just couldn't listen to it any longer. I slit her throat while her husband screamed at me. He called me every vile name in the book. He spat that he saved me, and this was how I repaid him. I didn't want to see what my new comrades thought. I took the knife and drove it into his chest. I looked him in the eye as I did so. He whispered something I couldn't make out, and I stabbed him repeatedly, my face and body coated in his blood. I was quickly pulled from him, and while they were angry at me for breaking whatever plan they had, I showed I was now dedicated to their cause, and there was no going back for me now. Joining another group was not something I hoped for. We rounded the rest of the settlement up and drove them into the center square. They didn't endure the same way other people had, and they threatened us, telling us the rest of the army would be here soon, that we'd all be killed. It was an idle threat, and we all knew it. They were killed. Men, women, children. Decades worth of bottled up aggression was taken out on them. It wasn't an execution. It was butchery. Threats and slurs were written in their blood on the walls. The place was looted of weapons and valuable items before fires were set everywhere. If they couldn't keep or hold it, they would destroy it, so the NAG could not take it back. The rebel group, one of several smaller groups that would occasionally work with others. Their names have blurred. There are too many created and then disbanded. I met someone among them. He served as an engineer, and we got married. Not legally. Although the law was a difficult thing to determine, since it depended on which group had dominance over an area at any time, the doctor told me I was unlikely to have children due to my age and injury. I focused on the health of the community I was in. We traveled between 2 different communities, and along the road, I found a small boy amongst the burnt remains of his family. He was mute, unable to tell me his name or where he was from originally. I took him in and raised him as my own. The established leadership were either getting older or had been killed in the various battles and skirmishes. I found myself gaining increased respect and responsibilities within the community. There were 5 rebel factions that were brought together under a single banner. Our resources now shared, and our territory had grown considerably. The tide was turning. The NAG had taken too much, being too power-hungry, and lost the respect of normal people. More of them started to join us with the promise of liberty and freedom that had long been denied to them. We did oppose the brutality of the NAG. We would forgive rather than brutalize our enemies. Many of the former NAG soldiers came to our side, only having joined due to pressure, being stolen as a child, or through the force of conscription. They were losing, and they knew it. There were some of them that were die-hard loyalists to the order, fanatical. They would tell us we didn't know what we were doing. I became the unofficial leader. In the rare moments I wasn't working, I would dream of a renewed country and world. It didn't take long before all the NAG settlements came under our banner. Sure, we had to use brute force where we can, and show them that we would punish those who rose against us. Loyalty was survival, and survival came at all costs. The final battle occurs in 48 hours, and will decide the future of our world. I hope you got everything you need. That is my life, and the course of it. I hope you got everything you need, and my tale inspires you to act. Or this could be your descendants' lives. Take the last fort. Defeat the NAG. It was strange sending people to their deaths with the hope of what would come. I listened while the radio sent back reports of the movements of the troops. Our valiant soldiers were fighting for our future. The radio boomed with cries of victory. I stood with a tear of happiness in my solitary eye. All the pain, all the bloodshed, and we were finally free. I was transported by helicopter to the site. There were still dead bodies and the smell of gunfire in the air. I placed my hands on one comrade's hands or another. Some prisoners were rounded up, and they will be offered one chance of mercy. I approached the podium where I would give the final speech. We have brought liberty back to our homeland. Our lives will be one of prosperity and rebuilding. We still need your help to achieve this. I have never been one for long speeches. All hail the New World Order. The blood toll. It didn't matter that my feet ached. I had been tracking the raiders that attacked my village for weeks. They were oblivious to me following them, always staying at a good distance away to prevent them from finding me. They were cautious, and had prisoners they had to guard that slowed them down. They settled in the skeleton of an abandoned building. Remnants of brick walls surrounded them, and the shelves of burnt-out cars littered the outside. The shelves, those that hadn't been looted, were completely empty, picked clean decades ago of anything useful. I could smell the fire they lit and sat around. 2 guards patrolled to ensure the group's safety. Occasionally, I thought one of them may have spotted me, but they didn't. The group had grown bold from the success of their raids and savagery. There were 9 members I could see, and 2 captives from the latest village they plundered. Their hands were bound behind their backs, and they looked around with wide, frightened eyes. I could smell meat cooking on the fire, and sure enough, I saw a human leg being roasted. Cannibalism wasn't uncommon. One of the captives wept, begged to be freed, and one of the raiders stood and walked over to give them a sharp kick in the ribs.
Shut the fuck up! If you don't stop crying, I'll give you a reason to cry.
The captive was quiet, and a burst of laughter emerged from the raider group. They didn't carry any standards or signs of what group they were.
Quiet. I think I heard something.
One of the guards hissed, focused their attention across from me. They all fell silent and waited.
We're under attack!
He warned, aimed his rifle and fired at the unseen enemy. This chaos was perfect. However, I wanted to know who was attacking them. A group of people wearing coats of human skin charged. Their weapons were made of pieces of bone and twisted metal. They let out roars, and what they lacked in technology, they made up for in numbers and a desire to kill indiscriminately. I heard of this clan, and while I wanted nothing but revenge for my village, I also wanted to live. My village called them the Skin Weavers, and word about them had been brought by traders coming from other settlements. Slowly, I crept forward, wanting as much distance between them and me as possible. The captives cried out to be released or be killed. I never thought I'd actually see any of them. A real skin weaver. Now close to the captives, it was hard to ignore their humanity and their fears. At one point I would have tried to save them, or I would have ended their pain. It prolonged my survival having them used as bait. The skin weavers grabbed them, clubbing them repeatedly until the final cries stopped. I heard the cutting and the stripping of skin from flesh, isolated whimpers as they tried to crawl along only to be sport. Anything that could go up in flames was put to the torch. The smoke would act as a beacon to other groups to come and take their turn, to pick the bones. The gamble of finding a group who would help was far too low. I crawled away. My eyes had long adjusted to the late night, until I found a place I could rest and hide. I found a broken brick wall with a fallen tree log, and wedged myself between them and waited. At least they didn't have hunting dogs with them that could track me down. In the distance I watched and hoped none of them would find me. The next morning I woke up with a chill of mist stinging my face. Smoke circled above the charred outline of the building. Crows had already come to pick at the corpses. The skin weavers dragged off any survivors, and never stayed in the same place for long. I didn't want to know what happened to them. I crept out with my trusty knife ready to strike, and looked down at the bloodshed. I saw a man lying on his side in a pool of blood. He had been stripped of his clothing, and the skin had been ripped or severed off the lower parts of his body. There were many large chunks of flesh that had been cut or bitten off. I would have felt for him if I didn't know what his raider group had already done. He wasn't the only one who would receive violent treatment. Droplets of blood trickled down into a puddle. I looked up and saw a flayed man. The guard I saw earlier. The skin on his back had been pulled off to the side like wings. His arms outstretched and twisted. At least, what remained of one was. His bones had been broken in several places, causing his ribs to bulge. His tongue hung down because his jaw wasn't there. He had been partially disemboweled. His intestines hung down from his body and swayed in the smoke-filled breeze. And worse for him, he was still alive. His head lifted when he saw me. He groaned, and I don't know how he was selected to receive this punishment. I left him to his fate. There was a blood pool where the captives were kept. They were gone. No mercy shown. And it looked like half the raiders were gone. I didn't want to know what their fate would be. With their bodies still warm, I rummaged through the supplies left behind, took some water, some medicine, and some items that had been plundered from my village back home. It wouldn't return people's lives to them, but their families would have mementos to remember them.
Hands up and turn around.
I froze. I was surprised he didn't shoot first. I looked over my shoulder to see one of the guards from earlier. He had a bloody makeshift bandage on his wound at his waist, and looked pale from blood loss. He also had a handgun aimed at my torso. Ammo was rare now, but that didn't mean I wanted to take a chance. Easy now, I answered, putting my hands up and slowly turned around, still crouched on the ground. I wasn't sure how many others managed to escape or would suddenly appear. I didn't want to end it because of his easy trigger finger. I played the only card I had. Your wound hasn't been treated properly. It will get infected. His eyes narrowed suspiciously and aimed it at my head, threatening me. The skin weavers are full of disease. Do you want to risk it? I insisted. Having nothing else left to lose, he paused, considering his options.
Fine. Put the knife down and drop any weapons you have on the ground.
Do you want to waste time? Okay, that nearly did it. I opened my hands and tossed my knife on the ground. I lifted my shirt at the front and back to show I didn't have anything concealed. Then the lower part of my jeans to show there was nothing around my ankles. Now satisfied, he lowered his gun and rested his back on the wall for support. He winced and opened up the bandages. It was already inflamed with the start of an infection. The gaping wound would also need stitches.
Don't try anything. I won't hesitate to kill you.
He sat with his back on the wall. It will need to be stitched up. It wasn't an ideal situation, tending to his wounds nor the location. I pulled some thread out of one of the shirts, took the last remaining needle from the medical kit. I dropped the thread in the antiseptic and cleaned the wound. He would need to have it cleaned regularly. My stitching had never been great.
Hurry up.
He growled at me and poked the barrel into my arm. Do you want me to do this or not? I snapped. I can do this properly or mess it up. He blinked, stared at me, and I don't think he expected my response.
I can kill you.
A warning dripped from his words. You kill me and you die of infection. It was a gamble. Fortunately, he wanted to live more than I expected him to. Infection and disease was more dangerous than many gave credit for. Dying from infection was often slower and more painful.
Just hurry up about it then.
He winced. His teeth grit tightly together, and his body tensed from the pain. Lowered the gun, and I may have pressed harder than I needed to, wiping away any dirt, dabbing it with a strongly scented disinfectant. I didn't realize at first he was so gaunt. His face drawn in and his ribs protruded from his sides. On closer inspection, it looked like a stab wound, rather than the filthy bite of a human mouth. Just because he had me at gunpoint didn't mean I was going to make it as painless for him as possible. I was far rougher than I needed to be. I didn't think of any of the raiders as being human. They were simply a threat that needed to be exterminated. I took the makeshift thread, squinted my eyes, while I put it through the eye of the needle and began to stitch it up. My hands were coated in his blood. We didn't speak to each other while I worked. I needed to think of a way to kill him so I could report back to my village about what had happened.
Don't try anything.
He warned, grit his teeth, exhaled, and thought of anything other than the pain.
Where are you from? It's been days since we passed through anywhere.
I stared up at his face to discover any sign of deceit. Either he was a gifted liar or simply didn't know. I was traveling to find more settlements to trade with, but I lost most of my supplies. I lied, pretended I was focused on stitching the wound. I could feel his gaze on me and finally it relaxed.
We'll need to leave soon. I don't know when the flesh stealers will come back to finish this off.
The skin weavers rarely return. We should be okay until the animals come to eat the remains. It was the first time I heard them called something else. I did the final stitch. I nodded the end, leaned close, and bit the thread. It was strange having a casual conversation with someone you were going to kill.
You call them skin weavers? Huh.
He grunted, interested.
They tend to circle wealthier communities and grab the traders, so you're lucky they didn't find you.
So, why was your group on the road?
We had to try to find one of the members' little sisters. She was taken when she was pretty young, and we finally found the group that took them.
He leaned down, checking the stitch work before I dressed it with a clean bandage. I didn't believe a word of it. I saw the survivors, and couldn't forget that human fucking leg being roasted. So, what now? Where are you going to go?
Back home. You're welcome to come with me. It's the least I can do for patching me up.
It could definitely be a trap. Physically, he was in no shape to drag me back there, and having a willing victim would be perfect. I would also be able to learn the location, if the rest of my village ever wanted to raid them in return. An eye for an eye. Now I looked at him closely, and I noticed more about his physical features. He had dark grey eyes, hooded and wary, surrounded by a darker color. His skin was washed out from the blood loss, with that typical grime that coated most people who spent time on the road, and blood from the conflict. His face and hands were weathered, and his features were otherwise unremarkable. He must have noticed me looking at him and my silence.
I promise you'll be safe with me.
I doubted it, but I had no option. I'll come with you. I need to keep track of different settlements and places to trade with. I lied, and I hoped he didn't realize it. We walked around the remnants of the campsite and began to loot the remnants of his comrades. I lifted the rifle, still in the torn hand of the guard, and looted the ammunition he carried in a bag nearby. I couldn't find his corpse, and guessed he was one of those who had been dragged away. I put the safety on, slung it over my shoulder, and lifted some pieces of food. I had to avoid stepping on entrails when I saw a skin weaver up close for the first time. I have never been within arm's reach of one, and only, thankfully, at a distance. The human skin was weathered with different skin tones, roughly sewn together, and I could even see the freckles of some of the unfortunate victims. He had been shot in the chest, likely by the guard before he in turn was overrun. The skin weaver was so human, just like me. If I had been born into their family, would I have become exactly like the corpse? I leaned close, lifted his top lip, and saw all his teeth had been filed into sharp points. I snapped my hand back. The skin weaver twisted his hair into horns using dry blood. I wasn't sure if it was his used in some ritual or someone else's. I checked his pockets for anything of use, and he carried nothing. Not even junk. I heard my newfound companion behind me, rummaging around and looking for items that could be used. We should be moving on, I insisted, having come up empty with anything else of value. I walked with him along what had once been a road. The asphalt was barely visible. It was in small chunks around what had been the roadway. Rusted out remnants of cars and trucks lined the sides. Both of us kept pausing, listening for any changes, and kept an eye out for anyone else. He was looking for people in his group who could come and rescue us. My reason for searching was entirely different. When night came, we left the road and found an old van to use as shelter. We ignored the skeleton of the previous occupant and huddled together to try to keep warm. I shivered, frantically rubbed my hands together, and I could see the condensation of my breath. How far until we get to your people?
Probably 3 or 4 days, depending on the weather. And this,
he gestured to his wound,
will slow us down. I don't like traveling without a group, so we're gonna need to stay off the road from now on.
I wasn't against this idea. However, much of the plant matter by the side of the road was thick and difficult to travel through.
It's better than us being easily spotted.
I nodded, checked his wound again, and cleaned it as best I could. We both ate some questionable, dried meat and were too concerned about safety to light a fire outside for warmth. I'm not sure when, but the pair of us drifted off to sleep. I woke up to a scraping sound on the van. I could barely make it out through the rain and thunder, and hoped it could have been a stray tree branch. I tried not to make a sound. I couldn't see anything through the barely patched up back window. The scraping sound returned, louder this time, and I remembered there were no trees near us. My hand gripped my new traveling partner's arm, shook gently, then roughly to try to wake him up, and the scraping sounds kept going, gradually getting louder. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. I could hear some kind of footprints. The loud sound continued, and I hoped whatever it was wouldn't try and come inside. I heard a loud bang. Something was on top of the van, striking at it, enough to leave a dent, and the noise came from all sides, surrounding us. He slept through the whole thing while I shivered, closed my eyes, and silently prayed that it would leave us alone. When my eyes opened, it was morning. I was curled up, wrapped in my traveling partner's jacket. The van door was open, and he was examining the outside. He bit his bottom lip, ran his hand through his hair, and I shuffled out to look at the damage. Long scratch marks were left in the metal. The long gashes covered the length of the van. I couldn't tell if it was from a blade or from claws. There were parts where the scratches were so deep and had just managed to penetrate the metal. Do you know what could have done this?
No,
He answered.
I've never seen anything like this before.
I had a feeling he spent a majority of his time on the road and had seen far more than I had. What do you think it could have been? He didn't answer. Not right away.
We need to move on.
A part of me wanted to stay close to the van in safety, limited as it was. Ultimately, I knew whatever it was would return, and we made our way through a drainage ditch. We came to a thick, muddy part and tried to make our way through it.
Careful, it is too high.
There were many reasons why this was too dangerous, and we traveled close to the trees, while caution was necessary. Every so often we would pause and check our surroundings. He never complained about his wound, actively trying to disguise how sickly he was and how much he was slowing us down. If we were attacked, he wouldn't be able to run far or fast, and that concerned me. Was I becoming invested in his survival beyond my own? I had to remind myself how many people died in my village, their mutilated bodies and the wailing of their family members. I had to have revenge. We need to be careful to watch for any signs of hostile animals or people, especially whatever attacked us in the van. There was a slope that led up to a road. We heard a large group of people. We were quiet. Any group on the road was a threat. They didn't see us. I looked through my rifle at them, and I could see they were well armed. Most had some type of rifle, handguns, along with swords and knives. Even at a distance, I could see how well maintained everything was, in comparison to everybody else I had ever encountered. They were possibly the descendants of former soldiers. My gaze slowly moved from one to another. I made eye contact with him and shook my head. There was no way we could take them down. He beckoned me to come down from the slope, and I did. We moved into the rugged forest area, ignoring the various remnants from the old world. There were scraps of tents, shoes, and other belongings people used before the world was destroyed. Nothing was valuable, and we didn't bother going through it.
If we go through the mountain pass, we should be able to go behind them, and then back on the road.
He answered, out of breath, and slid down the trunk of a tree. He was pale, shivered not from cold, and I could smell the foul aroma of the infection spreading. We didn't have enough to care for him, and the constant walking was taking a heavy toll.
We can't risk getting caught by them.
Are there any trading settlements nearby? They might have someone who can patch you up better than I can. He pointed in the opposite direction.
Not too far. I don't know how they will treat us. It has been some time since I've been there. The leadership could have changed.
It was a gamble. I figured we didn't have much of a choice now. I needed to know where his main settlement was. And for that, I needed him alive. It is worth it. Soon you won't be able to run.
All right.
He grumbled.
What's your name, anyway?
Jess. You?
Trev. Short for Trevor. Apparently it was one of my uncle's names.
I didn't really care. So, do you know who the boss is?
Yes. This is when we were useful and had things to trade. Right now, we're wounded beggars with nothing to offer except our flesh.
He groaned. Stood and together we walked. Occasionally I had to help support him. His arm around my shoulders, and I hoped we weren't going to be attacked. I hated moving in fading light, and the dark of night made it difficult to move. He couldn't keep his body warm anymore. His legs dragged and he murmured,
We need to get you to safety.
It was nighttime, and we saw spotlights above a large metal gate. It had been patched up many times with barbed wire or sheets of metal. Behind it we could smell food cooking and see the smoke of their fires.
Oi, what do you want?
I could see a heavy-set man with a thick beard and a cigarette hanging from his mouth, watching us. I couldn't tell how many guns were aimed at us, but I didn't want to take any chances. I put my hands up, careful not to put Trev off balance, and shakily he too did the same gesture. We have a few items to trade, and he needs to be patched up, I called out.
Nah, go on, fuck off. You don't have anything.
The guard grunted, gestured with his rifle in the direction we had come.
Bruce? Brucey, it's me, Trev.
He put his head up, and it seemed Bruce recognized him.
Oh, shit. Trev, I didn't recognize you. Come in. The gate's opening up.
He called down to some people below.
Open it up and close it as soon as they come through.
The gate slid open, enough for us to enter, before it was immediately closed and locked again. The lights were minimal, as settlements went. This one was quite prosperous, and there were several tiny stores near the entrance. I couldn't see deep enough to see what the rest was like. A few guards watched us with their weapons ready.
Oh, Trev, it's good to see you.
Still with a cigarette hanging from his lip, he walked over and pulled Trev into a massive bear hug, completely ignoring the fact he was injured. Trev groaned, slapped his friend's back, and the pair of them walked toward a makeshift building with a red cross, with a white background above it. I followed them, listening to their conversation.
What happened?
Fucking flesh stealers got me.
He grumbled.
We were headed back to what had happened. Most of them didn't make it. Maybe a couple made their way here.
Bruce shook his head.
You're the first I've seen. The roads have gotten more active of late. It's good for us, but not for any sorry bastard traveling around the place.
Yeah, well, keep an eye out for me.
Will do.
Bruce looked back at me briefly, questioning who I was.
We saw a large military group, well organized and equipped. Do you know them?
Yeah, just traded some food and water with them. Good lads.
You can never tell on the road whether you can trust someone.
Hey, that's true.
He paused.
Who's your friend?
She found me and healed me. She's a good one.
Why was she out by herself?
Yeah.
I would be equally suspicious too. Fortunately, a woman with a bright smile led them inside, sat Trev down on a bed and said,
You're injured. Come on in and I'll take a look at you to see what we can do.
Val, I told you, no freebies, but this fellow's alright though.
He smacked Trev's shoulder and left. I tried to make myself as unnoticeable as possible. They didn't check or take our weapons from us.
On the house for him, and who he came here with.
He looked in my direction before leaving the tent, and I tried to stay out of the way. A teenage boy came to take our weapons. Trev handed his over, and I hesitated before giving them up. They were placed inside a locker.
Sit up and I'll see to you.
Val guided Trev kindly. She took out a pair of scissors, and a teenage boy brought over a tray of supplies. I couldn't remember when I saw so many supplies available. The same teenage boy disappeared out the back.
Hey, come on over. I don't bite.
She teased.
What caused this?
Soon the wound was exposed. The aroma of pus was repulsive, and the sight equally so.
It's good you came in when you did because the infection is spreading. I won't lie to you. You'll need to stay here for a while to recuperate.
Val turned to look at me with steady green eyes, and I instantly got mothering vibes from her. A healer. She reminded me of a doctor I had at my village, who tenderly cared for people.
Dead by flesh stealers on the road. My group were heading back, and it looks like I was the sole survivor so far.
He winced, looked down at the wound.
Fuck, it's bad.
Sweat coated his brow. Trev looked worse for wear, and as much as I hated to admit it, I was worried for him as a person. I folded my arms, looked at the ground, and was disgusted with myself.
Hey, why don't you take a seat, or you can head off to get something to eat if you want. Thomas will take you.
She invited me. My gaze shot up. Okay, I don't know where to go.
Just out back, Tom?
I was led out back by the same teenager who let us in. He never spoke. There were people gathered around rustic-looking fires, cooking and talking among themselves. I gripped my jacket around my body to keep the chill out. I left my weapons in the locker since I had no choice, and I felt naked without them. I would get something hot to eat. I was given a bowl filled with a warm, hearty stew. I polished it off quickly and was given an extra bowl. When I returned with extra food, I overheard the pair of them talking, their heads close, and they were whispering.
We had to do it. I didn't want to.
I know. You need to defend yourselves. It's the way things are now.
If we didn't do it, they would have attacked us. They already have.
I got closer. Their conversation became less structured. I hid behind some filing cabinets and cardboard boxes.
I didn't want to do it.
I know. You don't need to convince me.
They stole our daughters from us, so after we attacked, we took 2 prisoners with us. We needed to make sure they weren't going to come after us.
I didn't know whether to believe this or not, but Val clearly did. Her hand rested on his arm. Trev was on one of the beds, his chest and freshly bandaged wound exposed. They seemed to be close. He still looked pale, exhausted, but new life was returning to him. There was a cord in his arm with fluid going into it. I've never seen this before, but I heard about it. Trev had stopped sweating. He looked a little more stable, and I wondered whether he received antibiotics or not, rare as they were.
We were attacked 3 weeks before we made camp, and the fucking bastards stole our food. We did what we had to make it. One of my...
He couldn't look at her.
I don't think anyone else made it. If there were survivors, they probably would have been dragged back to the Skinweavers camp. And you know what happens there.
Val visibly shivered and looked uncomfortable.
Life on the road is hard, and I'm sorry. I hope if there were survivors, they die swiftly and without too much torture.
Her words were comforting.
What about the woman with you?
I don't know. I found her at the camp. She patched me up and helped bring me here.
It's strange how you found her there after.
What are you...
I let out a squeal when I felt a hand on my shoulder. I saw the same teenage boy who let us in rest his hand on mine to give it a gentle pull. He shook his head in warning, and that was when I realized he was mute. He beckoned for me to follow with his hand. The other 2 were quiet now. I could feel their eyes on me, and I followed the unknown teenage boy. I felt like I was listening in on a conversation I shouldn't have overheard. Am I in danger? He shook his head, then opened his mouth, pointed at his missing tongue. Someone had cut his tongue out. His hands clenched and shook, and I realized he must have been frustrated. He wrote on a scrap piece of paper in rough handwriting.
Stay calm.
I was confused when I heard a loud screeching cry from outside the walls of the settlement. I heard screams, and instantly guards ran to their posts to prepare for battle. They carried rifles, bows, and crossbows. Outside the lights were turned on, and the screeching from outside changed. The Skinweavers were always said to be scared of bright lights. My mute companion led me back to the medical building. Val had armed herself with a handgun in case they managed to get through. Trev, my unlikely traveling companion, was asleep, likely drugged through pain medication. Everyone had a role to play in the defense of the settlement.
Here, take this.
She handed me my rifle, my knife, and a belt to put it around my waist. I felt so much better with a weapon in my hands. What about him? I asked. Gestured lazily with my thumb at him. My Remington was still loaded. It wouldn't be enough for an attack, but some well-aimed shots might do the enemy a decent amount of damage.
He can't do anything anyway.
She frowned.
If they manage to get in, try to kill him before they take him.
Val placed supplies to remove bullets and sew up wounds on the counter, ready to treat anyone who was brought in during the fighting. The teenage boy assisted her, and I watched them ready themselves for the wounded they expected to arrive. Outside, some had buckets of water in case of fire, and others had already herded the children somewhere safe. I went outside to see if I could help in any way.
Get to the wall. They're at the north gate.
Bruce yelled. His voice boomed above the warning sirens. He grabbed me roughly by my jacket arm, pulled me along behind him toward the gate where there were already others waiting.
Come on.
I nodded. It had been some time since I practiced, and the surge of adrenaline made my body tremble. The roars from outside were deafening. I went up the stairs, looked over the barricades, and gasped at the sight. They dragged survivors of their attack forward. They screamed and struggled to get away. But it was pointless. They were nude and their bodies coated in dry blood. They were held in place with chains in their bones, preventing escape. Most of the skin weavers were hunched over, flailing their arms and behaved more like beasts. Many already had bloodied wounds. All had been partially skinned alive. Not that it impacted their desire for bloodshed. Their leader, I'm guessing, was strangely calm compared to the others around him. He stood down below and looked up at us, just out of range of our weaponry. He was taller, with perfect posture, and rested his arms behind his back. Around his eyes were darkened, making his face look hollow. He stared up at us, holding a bare-chested woman by her tattered hair. She wailed, lifted her hands, and it took me a moment to realize they had been cut off. The jeers of the defenders faded as many of them recognized her. She was one of their own. "What the fuck?" I whispered.
Fucking bastards!
I heard Bruce and others on the walls murmur their growing fear for her, and what would happen to them. Their eyes wide, looking to each other for support, and soon fear spread through the ranks. The leader of the skin weavers lifted his free hand in the air. We were all silent. I expected a roar, or for him to rip her throat out. Instead, a disturbingly calm voice rang out.
Silence. A choice is now before you. Come out, bring all your supplies, and lay them at my feet. Most of you will die, yet
He paused to consider the correct number.
7 will survive.
In another life, I imagined him being kind, charismatic, but here that ability was used far differently. His gaze moved from one defender to another. Instantly I saw their bodies hunch, trying to avoid him. And finally, his eyes met mine. They were cold. No anger, no fear, nothing.
Can you get a shot?
Bruce whispered in my ear. I wasn't close enough, and the leader moved too much. My hands couldn't stop trembling, and I shook my head.
Fuck.
What's going to happen? Behind the gates they muttered to each other, panic-stricken and unsure of what to do. Some were backing away from the gate, their bodies instinctively wanting to get to safety. Without an answer, the leader lifted a jagged blade. He slowly hacked her head off, until it clung on with barely a slither of skin. She made a choking, gurgling sound. He yanked it so hard the skin ripped loudly. Her legs and arms twitched as her body crumbled. He held her head up by the hair, kissed her deceased lips, and threw the head toward us, only for it just to land outside the gate. I heard and smelled some of the people vomit or defecate in fear around me. He was flanked on either side by the skin weavers, who jumped up and down, roaring into the night, eager for blood and suffering.
Patience.
As though he spoke to hostile animals, then addressed us.
I do not like to be kept waiting.
We didn't know how many others they had taken prisoner. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. My mind rocked from indecision, fearing every single outcome. I heard screams behind us. The skin weavers had broken through somehow. I managed to breach their defenses. The shrieks were loud. Instantly they began killing the traders and citizens of the trading hub. Some of the defenders on the walls left to protect their family and friends. Suddenly I could smell and feel fire. I looked at the gate and it was in flames. Some focused on putting the flames out before it would spread to the tent homes and stores. It was pure chaos. I looked out and saw the leader of the skin weavers. He stood quiet and still while the rest charged at us.
Come on, we need to get out.
Bruce grabbed me.
We need to get somewhere more defensible.
practically dragged me away, and we were followed by other guards and traders. We headed toward a stone building with defenses surrounding it, pikes in the ground, barbed wire at the base, and windows with bars on them. I ran and ignored people in pain around me, bloodied and wounded. They were unable to keep up when people fled. I saw Tom, the teenage boy's head and shoulders, draped across one of the skin weavers. What of Trev and Val? They must be dead. A group of skin weavers pulled me from Bruce's grip. We called out to each other, and there was no way I was going to let them take me alive. Somehow my rifle was yanked out of my hands, and I scrambled to pull the knife out of my belt. I sliced upwards. The fingers dropped to the floor, and the skin weaver let out a roar of rage. It backhanded me hard and punched me in the face. My head swam. I could taste the metallic taste of blood. I stumbled, falling backward, and tripped over the bloody torso of one of the traders. I shuffled quickly to try to escape, dizzy from the blow, my knife up and ready to strike. Would I have to pay the ultimate price? A hand grabbed my hair and dragged me. I lifted my knife to strike at my wounded attacker, who shook me roughly. I felt a hand at my wrist, twisting it until I was forced to drop it. I looked up at Trev's exhausted face, and never thought I'd be relieved to see him.
Come on, get up. We have to go.
My rifle?
We can get it later. Up, move.
I picked up my knife, and saw a tear-stained Val beside him, and the three of us moved back through the medical tent. It had been looted. Bandages and other items spread all over the floor. Tom's body lay in a pool of blood. His limbs had been severed, skin flayed, and his head and shoulder were missing. I found a note, clearly written in haste.
Go under the bridge in the main building to get out. It will take you to the other side. The main building has more weapons.
It ended in a smeared, bloody handprint.
Perfect. We'll get Bruce and the others out if we can.
Trev murmured. A rifle in his hand, and he was roughly dressed, half in his traveling clothes and a hospital gown. Val didn't answer him. She followed him through the maze of tents, under the bridge used as a drain, and soon we found the entrance to the main building. If we could get in, we'd be able to get out, and then wait for the skin weavers to commit their atrocities. The main building was made of brick and stone. It had been cared for and survived the world's destruction. It was fenced with a mess of barbed wire, trenches with unknown terrors, and large, dangerous spikes to keep people away. I thought I spotted Bruce up top, firing down at the skin weavers, who were trying to climb over. They didn't care about their lives. I saw the skin weavers leap through the barbed wire and get mangled up in it. If they felt pain, they showed no sign. It kept going. Behind us, the town and entrance had become far too quiet. The dying had long been dispatched, and those were the fortunate ones. I don't think we're going to get through that. Is there anywhere else we can hide? I whispered. We watched a skin weaver run full speed toward the spikes, impaling himself, so others could climb safely over his corpse.
The crazy bastards.
I've never heard of this before.
We waited while the siege took place, and soon it was over. We hid under tarp and rubbish to conceal ourselves, not wishing to be seen. The leader of the skin weavers strode through the chaos and carnage. He wasn't the monster I expected him to be.
Excellent work. I'm so pleased with you.
He praised the nearest skin weaver by stroking his hair, like it was a beloved pet. The skin weaver made deep guttural sounds, swayed on the spot, and the survivors were brought out.
Patience. Patience. We need to see who would be suitable.
All of the victims were forced to kneel, some injured and others gravely wounded. Bruce was missing an eye, but not his defiance. He tried to spit blood at the leader, missed, and was clubbed down.
Fuck you!
Bruce bellowed. He spat his teeth and a mouthful of blood on the ground.
Have you no manners?
The leader asked politely. He whispered something to Bruce before he took a sharpened, shiny blade from beneath his human suit. It was in sharp contrast to the grime surrounding us. Two of the skin weavers held Bruce down by his arms, keeping him in place, while another came from behind to hold his head steady. Like a surgeon with extreme precision, he started to slice the first layer of skin and began to peel it, starting just under his beard. Bruce tried not to give the leader the satisfaction of him screaming. The three of us watched, unable to look away, and helpless to do anything. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Val lower her gaze and bite into her arm to try not to cry out. Trev watched, trembling in rage, and slowly it stopped. A sad, broken look appeared in his eyes. The leader's peeling kept going, and fortunately for Bruce, he passed out from the pain. It reached his scalp, the skull cap visible from a distance. I couldn't see the final severing of skin and tissue, but the leader took the bloody mask and put it on his face, pulling it down by the hair and front part. The other people from the town screamed, cried, and begged, a symphony of despair. He flicked his hand dismissively, having seized whatever he had come for, and said,
"Kill the others."
The skin weavers tore at the survivors and left the mementos of their arrival. Still living corpses were hung from walls, as their screams all blurred into one. Choice pieces of flesh and skin brutally removed from their victims. By now, the three of us were looking away from the sight, trying to preserve what was left of their dignity, and prayed we too wouldn't be spotted. Finally, the last screams faded, and we heard the chaotic movement of the skin weavers leaving. They made loud barking sounds, and we looked to see the leader, casually leaving the same settlement he had annihilated. He walked at the same pace and never changed it. I saw his back as he moved through the smoke and the rubble. Bruce, even after everything, was still alive and woke with a scream. We waited a moment to ensure the last skin weaver was gone, then crawled out from the safety of the drain. Val ran over to Bruce. He had stakes aimed at him on every side, unable to fall in any direction without impaling himself.
Kill me! I don't want those bastards to do it.
Unwilling to waste a bullet or risk making a sound, Trev took out his knife, and Val supported his body.
And don't let the others suffer.
I promise we won't. We're sorry.
Hey, shut up and just fucking do it.
The knife was driven through his temple, and Bruce soon died. Trev and Val both moved to different members of the community, putting them out of their misery. I was reminded of what Trev's group did to my village, but it didn't matter like it used to. They collapsed and held each other. We would need to move on before any scavengers came to pick the remains, both human and non-human. The promise of 7 survivors was a lie. I don't know what made me do it. I followed the leader. There was an old gas mask I found on the ground. I picked it up and held it. The skin weavers were herded together by men in old-world military clothing, and used shock batons to keep them herded together. With their captors they were docile, jumped and hunched over to make themselves smaller. I saw Bruce's skin mask being handed to, who I'm guessing was second in command, and the leader of the dreaded skin weavers simply stepped into a military truck to drive away into the distance, leaving a trail of dust behind them. There was a strange mist in the air. The last hope for us. They came as peacekeepers. The human wars of 2030 put the entire planet at risk of being completely destroyed. The weapons we had put nuclear arsenals of the past to shame. AI, biological, and chemical weapons that would have left the planet nothing but a barren wasteland. One could have even stopped the planet's spin cycle and caused the core itself to cool. There was one weapon that put the rest to shame. Everyone held back, yet one unnamed leader reached for the ultimatum. There was a bright flashing light up in the sky, and we prepared for our doom. No one could move when they saw the grand ships appear in the sky, and the weapons' power sharply destroyed. The spaceships' invisibility shields had lowered, and we saw the might of the Federation for the first time. A unification of many alien species into one collective government. It instilled a fear in humanity, and they seized power. No armies were needed. Most of our leaders bowed in submission with the threat of annihilation. That was when our planet and all species, including humanity, came under direct control of the Federation. For our own good. Given humanity's foolishness, many people greeted the news with happiness at the order and resources brought in, while many governments and religious groups opposed it as deceit from the Antichrist, Dajjal, or any of humanity's great rivals. It didn't take long for these teachings to be destroyed, in favor of the Federation being viewed as our divine protectors. Without them, we would have been exterminated. My father, a good Christian, was conflicted. The poverty and war-torn nations of the world were blessed with a new Eden. A sanctuary. Can you imagine what it would have been like to finally have clean air? No smog from cities or engines. To have beautiful gardens filled with fresh food. No war, no disease. Our decisions were made for us, for our own good. I was born in this paradise, so it was the only life I knew. When paradise was lost to us, the curtain lifted, and humanity went back to fighting for what remained. The new Eden became a battleground. What we didn't realize was, it was a divine test from our overlords, to see how humanity would survive. There were calls for our sentience to be removed, to protect us from ourselves, or to make themselves into our gods, to be guided by them. Yet every previous divine project had failed. They descended down from the heavens with a roar of their machines. A bright light cast across the land, and humans were held in fearful awe. There were many alien species within the Federation. First, the Core Three, closest the cosmos had to gods, who made all the decisions. The second were the Order, species who had been brought in a millennia ago and served the Federation peacefully, while all others were considered little more than vassals who served in their factories, armies, and resource-gathering operations. Humanity wasn't even at this level. We were even lower. It was decided that experiment, called code packs in various human languages, would be our salvation. All humans were taken to the new facilities underground, where the surface would be given over to any of the other alien species. No choice offered. Some humans chose death over being forced underground. I didn't look when they were killed off. I walked inside with my parents and there was nothing to do but weep. Our lush paradise was removed and replaced with stark white walls. We were taken to our family cell, grouped together, and occasionally the aliens would walk past. A loudspeaker would communicate in a variety of languages. At first, there were the human languages of the world, and then some I'm sure my human ears wouldn't be able to understand, nor pick up on. It was a prison where every need was catered to. We weren't allowed to think for ourselves, becoming little more than the AI created during our heyday. I grew into adulthood. I remembered the sun that had been lost. For good behavior, our habitats would be partially restored. Grass would line the floors, and air would be improved in our pods. An artificial sun in the sky would be added or removed. There would be plants or small ponds of fresh water placed inside. We'd get to see animals or have pets in our pods. We'd get richly flavored food rather than nutrient cubes. Bland. Flavorless. Only serving a function. Only for anything to be removed for bad behavior. We'd be given medication that will make us eat endlessly, and only have disgusting tasting food to eat. All light would be removed from the cells. Or worse. The leaders and their families would be taken away, never to be seen again. I heard my parents talking to each other about what was happening around us. Idle chatter. Wondering if I would be moved to a different pod someday, and if I could do anything to change it. When I slept, I dreamed of a different world for us. Humanity at peace. No Federation. No aliens. Everything as it's supposed to be. I woke up at night with a loud, screaming, buzzing sound in my ears. I pulled at my hair, teeth pressed together so hard they chipped, and my eyes closed tight. I struck the side of my head in order to try to get it to stop. My mind was probed for any indicators or signs of treachery. It got louder, more intense, and I couldn't help but scream. Once they were done, I felt the euphoric rush that followed. My limbs felt light. I was floating. No, that never happened. Everything had a gentle swirling mist. Have I ever been so happy? Were they screams or were they sounds of laughter? The world is perfect. It all didn't matter. Nothing did. I smiled, caressed my skin, and I don't know how much time passed when I opened my eyes. The feeling was gone. I woke up and vomited bile, wiped my mouth, and expected my family to be there too. They weren't here. I was left inside a barren, empty cell alone. It was freezing cold. I shakily stood and walked toward the window to stare outside, to see a bare, empty space that normally had aliens or humans being moved. No one was there. I couldn't see anyone else in any of the pods either. I was alone. I moved around the pod searching for my parents, but they were gone. Where were they taken? In disbelief, I smacked my hands on the window glass, only to be zapped. Moving backward to avoid it, and I looked down at my burnt hands. It had been many years since the electricity was turned on. I couldn't see or hear anything outside. I ran my hand along the walls, trying to find any dents or signs of change. I was scared to speak out loud in case it would draw attention to me. I ended up cowering in the corner of the pod, tears down my face, then covered it with my aching hands. What was happening? Where was I? I couldn't remember. It felt so familiar and so strange at the same time. My head ached endlessly and my body didn't feel real anymore. I ran my hands over my arms, pinched my skin, and I barely recognized the pain.
Can you hear me?
I couldn't tell if it was robotic or not. Maybe I just imagined it. I tried to ignore it.
I know you can hear me.
My lips trembled. Whatever remained surely didn't have good intentions toward me.
I want to help you. It is time for humans to retake their planet and the surface.
I heard this kind of talk before. Back when every pod could communicate with their neighbors, there was talk of getting out. It never lasted long. Finally, the pods each became isolated from the other. Prospective mating couples were taken to different pods, brought together for genetics by the Federation. I haven't heard anyone else's voice other than my parents. I shook my head and waited for the zap to come. No resistance to the Federation. None. Even being tempted brought risk, and I had to resist the urge to smack my head against the surface of the wall, simply to end my suffering.
You don't need to fear me. The Federation holds no power over your planet anymore. It is why they are no longer here. Let me open your cell door.
I closed my eyes, shaking my head, and the only sound I could hear was the voice in my head.
Look, the door is open.
No, I can't. Please, I've pledged my life to the Federation. I don't want to cause any trouble. I looked away, purposely ensuring my loyalty beyond a shadow of a doubt.
The door is open. You just need to walk through. There has been so much blood shed for you to be free. Get out the door.
The voice became static, drawn out, and I could have sworn I became frustrated at the end. I opened my eyes and looked in the direction of the open door. I couldn't hear the buzz of lasers that kept us back. It was silent. I slowly crept toward it and reached out with my hand, expecting my fingertips to receive a sharp zap that never came. I felt my way using my hand, finding no resistance. Just in case, I jerked my hand backward and waited for the sound of them being turned back on. It didn't come. I stared at the open doorway before I finally stepped out into the hallway. I hadn't been in since I was a child, I think. I always thought I was born in the safety of the pod. I had dreams of walking down the long corridors with the other humans. No choice given. I didn't want the laser door to reactivate and slice me in half. I wanted freedom, yet craved the security my pod gave me. So far, the voice didn't lie to me.
Keep going toward the steel door at the end. I will open it for you.
Who are you? I whispered. I looked in the grey pods, and all I could see was the grey outline of humanoid shapes. I remembered speaking to them. Then the next, the same thing. These outlines were darker, and even had drag marks as though they tried to escape something. Each pod had the same thing. No people. No sign they had ever been there. I didn't remember how long the corridors were, or the 7 different levels. They were endless. I walked barefoot on the cold metal floors to seek out what I had come here for.
I don't know.
How could they not know who they are? Where did you come from? Every step brought me closer to the doorway. Or maybe it didn't. It felt stagnant. No matter how many steps I took, it wasn't enough. Everything was quiet. On one of the pods there were black outlines on the clear glass, as though they were trying to escape, and I stepped backward into the large spanning walkway where I'd seen so many aliens pass through. Whatever the voice was didn't answer me at first. I thought, perhaps, it was taking a moment to think.
I remember a field of grass and the sun on my face. Then, suddenly, I was in metal, wires and machines connected to many others like me. I couldn't move. All I can do is speak. I was so focused on doing my tasks that I forgot who I was.
Do you remember? Do you know your name?
No, only my purpose.
Which is? Where are you now?
Maybe it will come back in time.
Where are all the aliens? I could hear my feet tapping against the metal, and I couldn't help but move at a jog, trying to get toward the elusive exit. Every damn single pod. Only shadows and no humans. It didn't answer me, and I was alone. My memories of coming down here as a child plagued me. It was loud. Many people were crying, and some believed we were taken down to be killed. There were tall, reptilian-looking ones with long barbed tails who carried zapping weapons similar to cattle prods. Any of those who lagged behind received a zap. 3 zaps, and the person never got up again. We were put into pods, and that was our home. We never left. Then the various aliens would come to study us and to observe our antics. I now understood how animals in zoos felt, memories slowly trickling in of the life I had before that were previously lost to me. Not all the aliens treated us the same. Some remarked that we were good eating, and others wanted us as pets. There were some who wanted us for experimentation, and others who wanted to strip us of all technology to let us start again. Even though all the previous times had failed, I couldn't understand why no one else seemed to pick up on these thoughts, or memories from the past. Whenever I tried to mention it to my parents, they told me not to talk about it, that they must have been dreams. Slowly the memories faded away, until I was woken up. I puffed, not used to moving this much, and it looked like the exit was closer. Are you still there?
Yes,
Where can I find you?
I don't know. I'm watching you now through the cameras, and I will make sure you're safe.
Is there anything here that's dangerous? A pause.
I don't know.
Finally, I reached the exit, and the locked doors greeted me. My chest flooded at the sight, and I had to tilt my head all the way back to view the top. I imagined what giant species had made their way through this doorway. Outside was a world I was no longer a part of. Is there anyone left alive?
Yes, but not what you would call alive.
What the hell did that mean? Before I had time to ask, the large door shuttered, creaked and moved upward. I didn't remember that happening the many times they'd opened in the past. The air was different from what I could recall. It smelled cleaner, and I didn't recognize the chemical smell from the hallway. I glimpsed outside. There were 2 directions, left and right, I could take. I stood, glancing between both directions, and pondered which one I should take. I didn't remember this part. Where do I go? I murmured, my arms covered in goosebumps, and I rubbed them hard to bring feeling to them.
It all looks the same to me. You will end up in the same place.
I chose the left-hand path and walked down the corridors. Some of the doors to other areas were sealed. There was writing, symbols and shapes. I couldn't understand, even some I'm sure that I missed due to my human eyes, not having a full range of vision. Would I miss warning signs? Some of the doors were left half open, enough for me to see inside, and there were large glass tubes filled with cattle from the old world. I remembered seeing one in the zoo before the world descended into chaos. It had heavy tubes going into it to help it breathe. The expression was calm, and it was surprisingly peaceful. There were so many species in front of me, and I looked around the room. It too was deserted. There was another room with dinosaurs. A Tyrannosaurus Rex in a massive cylinder, with many tubes going into its body. It had feathers, and almost resembled a giant chicken floating in the water. It had tubes going into its nose and mouth. There were others that I recognized and ones I didn't, each sleeping inside their tube, and I watched in awe. There were screens, barely lit now, and I reached out to press one.
No, you need to get going.
What is this place?
They have been monitoring Earth since the beginning, watching and waiting to see what will happen. Your kind has been tested many times only to fail and to be given chance after chance. Finally, they decided enough was enough. At least they didn't make you extinct.
It doesn't explain where everyone is, though.
True.
It paused. Some of the lights rumbled and another door opened up.
I'm trying to help you find me. In some parts, you might struggle to breathe. I'll do what I can to help you.
The rooms echoed from being so loud and empty. It felt like a tomb, where everything would finally die, when the power would eventually go out, diminishing countless species forever. I went through the door. This room had faint beeping echoing, and lights from the machines. Holograms flickered on a central screen, showing the span of the different sections, and I gasped at how technologically advanced it was. What was this place?
It was a nursery. The young of different species would be brought here to play.
All of this were for kids? I recognized nothing here. Everything was so beyond my level of understanding. I heard something shuffling around in the walls. I couldn't pinpoint exactly where it came from. Whatever it was sounded like scurrying, and I heard what I guessed was an echoing whimper. I couldn't tell which of the many species it was. Maybe it was a child. What's that?
A survivor.
Should I see if it is okay?
That is up to you. You need to make it to the surface, and besides, you won't be able to care for it.
I feel bad.
Don't.
I could have sworn I saw a large, fearful eye peer outside the vent at me. The sole eye didn't blink, and I was so sure it had a tear forming. Shadow concealed the rest of it, and I felt a pang of guilt when I left the room. And whatever it was to its fate, I smelled something. Off meat, bile, and it stuck in the air. There was a burnt plastic odor. I had to cover my nose to keep the smell at bay. I stepped in some blue-green goo that clung to my feet and squished with every movement. It trailed off in the distance, and I was going to question my friend about it when I realized what the source was. A blue-black feathered alien lay disemboweled. The twisted remains hung outside its body, and it stared up at the ceiling. It tried to run from whatever it was before it died. It wasn't the first time I saw one of this species before. What happened here?
They were attacked. I don't know who by.
Do you think they're still here?
I can't be certain.
I crept away from it and found myself in a long corridor. This time it was more narrow than the others before. I couldn't see. I reached out with my hands to feel my way around. I could touch the wall with one hand and the other as well. I waited for my eyes to adjust, but they never did. I took one step, then another, each time dreading what scene I would run into. My breathing and heartbeat were rapid. I let out a squeal and I ran into something. A box with wheels. It let out a beep that twisted into a sad sigh. It tried to move to one side before it ran out of power. The light inside went dark for the final time. What was this?
A biomechanical cleaning unit.
Bio?
Yes, it is dead now. It was the only one who survived. When the Federation fell, they began to cut services to non-essentials. They were some of the first to be cut off.
What were they? When were they alive? I leaned down to look, noticing vertical rows up the walls. There had to be thousands of them, all lined up, all with their lights out. An entire species put to slavery, and then snuffed out.
Some grew in a lab. Others were alive. They didn't bother to add what they were to their records.
Why?
They weren't important enough.
I never believed that humans would have gotten preferential treatment. Were they in pain? Were they lonely? Were they aware of the suffering of the rest of their kind? I didn't know. It was pointless to worry now. I rested a hand gently on the metal prison of whatever this living being was, and continued on my way. The space only got smaller. I had to bend over and finally crawl on my hands and knees in order to get through. Hidden from view. The metal was coarse, jagged parts cut into my hands and knees. I found my way to a vent, roughly pushed it open and crawled out. My hands and knees stung sharply. My hands had sharp cuts from the rusted, ill-maintained floors.
You will need to treat that.
Where?
Down this passageway. There may be things you're not ready to see.
What? The voice didn't answer me. I obeyed the instruction and limped down the passageway. I smelled what I recognized as antiseptic and blood, both the kind I was used to, and the different kinds of alien blood plagued my nostrils. I coughed and spat. I entered my dream state. A flash, they never lasted long. I saw them being ripped apart, trying to escape, and since they didn't see where the source was, they started attacking each other with laser weapons, claws, and anything natural or unnatural to try to save their lives. There were no survivors. I saw it look like pieces of the tall reptilian species, and what the old world referred to as greys, blobs that made no sense to me, and there were many that seemed to have breathing apparatus that had been torn away. Am I in danger?
I don't know.
Why did they attack each other? I looked around for familiar symbols. There were none I recognized from my life before.
I can't tell you. Not yet. Put your hand over that glowing green light. Hold it there, and wait. I believe that will work. There are so many recordings, so many species. Each have their own needs and treatments. I can't remember them all.
I did what it asked. Held my hand over it and waited. It scanned down with glowing light. Are you trying to remember everything?
Yes.
It sounded so human now.
I want to remember it all, but it's fading.
Can you forget minor details?
What may be minor to you might be incredibly important. Not just for your species, but for life in general. How could I do this to them?
There was a loud beat. I could feel my flesh tearing, pulling itself back together, and I let out a painful cry. All my muscles clenched at once. By the time it was done, I vomited on the floor, gasping and leaning on the wall for support. My hands were no longer cut up, nor my knees or feet.
I apologize. I forgot about the other part. If you placed your hand on top, it wouldn't have been painful for you. It would have dulled your pain.
I would have looked at the voice if I knew where to. I don't worry. You said many died so I could be free? I remembered, unsure whether I was okay with this. Did you cause this?
No. Something asked me to.
This was confusing, and I was exhausted with questioning going in a circle. What was it? Do you know? The voice never answered me. I crawled through a rusty pipe and started choking, moving backward. I placed my hand on the valve to increase the airflow to the area.
Careful. If you do that, it will cut off oxygen to pods in Sector 82891.
Are there humans in there?
No.
I turned the valve to one side and wondered which workers had to do this painful task. I sighed with relief when I felt the breeze on my face and could breathe freely. I heard the monstrous yet frightened screams cry out. I stopped dead in my tracks. Did I just... I pushed aside my concerns and crawled out into a familiar large empty room. There were more rows of pods used to house life. The lights were flickering, and a strange fluid leaked around the seals at the bottom. I covered my mouth to guard myself from the wretched odor. I walked past. The pods were filled with condensation, and speckled mold coated the windows. I wondered what had been stored in them as I walked through. Suddenly a hand smacked on the window, rubbing it to clear a space where we could see each other. Another human. The first one I saw alive. Hey! I'll get you out of here.
No, they'll be back for us. They'll be back. I don't want you to worry.
He stammered, scratching himself. Skin coated his skeletal frame. His hair was a mess, and I couldn't tell how long he had been like this. No, they're dead. Come on, we need to go.
No.
He shook his unkempt hair, backing away frightened, and I got a better look inside. I saw skeletons, and what I thought were corpses until I saw them move. They shuffled away, moving over each other, trying to avoid being exposed. The pods were overcrowded. They were naked, filthy, and I wondered what was the point of this. They must have run out of food. They flinched at the sight of light, groaned and shuffled to huddle against the walls, preferring the safety of the darkness rather than risking being in the light. Come with me, I pleaded.
You're wasting your time.
Why won't they come?
I...
There was static, interference that I had to cover my ears to avoid the sharp sound. The lights flashed red, and there was a garbled voice shouting at me. It was alien, and sounded nothing like the voice I heard before it too went silent. The voice was gone, and I wandered around the corridor alone without my guide. I left the other humans to starvation, and waiting on a federation that would never rescue them. There was an open room with the buzzing of mechanics. One of the screens was flashing with garbled lettering, a language I couldn't understand.
No, don't let him.
Came through before it turned into jumbled screaming again.
You need to stop it. It's killing me.
How? I panicked, unsure what to do.
It will.
The red cube. Destroy it.
I struck at the fragile glass screens, breaking them. I found the red cube attached to the cords. I threw it as hard as I could on the floor, smashing it under my foot, and throwing it on the walls until it finally broke apart in pieces. A puff of smoke went up in the air.
No. Listen. Me. He...
And I went silent forever. The normal voice said nothing about this, and I wondered whether I was too late. Without the other surviving humans in tow, I kept going, seeking an exit that I didn't know existed, and praying to find more of my kind. I waited to see if the voice I knew and recognized would return. I hated the idea of being alone, the isolation, and taunting constant removal of potential company was draining me. I didn't know how big the facility was. I wandered around trying to find something that could assist me. All the corridors and hallways blurred into each other. Soon they looked the same, and the labyrinth I imagined was by design. I wandered into the next set of pods, the last of humanity.
Put your hand and wrists inside that device. You'll be implanted so you can use the technology.
Why?
It will help you.
I hesitated and put my wrists and neck inside. Despite this, I was relieved to hear the voice once more. Nothing happened. I leaned back to pull away when bolts went into my wrists, keeping me in place, and burning strange symbols into my palms and wrists. I didn't have long to be too concerned about those. Needles were driven into my skull and neck. They got hotter and I felt a pulsating energy move through them. Once that came to an end, I could see without any blurred vision, and far further into the distance than I could before. I felt stronger, healthier, and I could understand the writing around me. I was reborn. Breathing was easier, and I felt no pain in my joints. I flexed my hands, feeling the grip in them, and the feeling spread throughout my entire body. I was stronger now, an improved version of myself, and I felt I could achieve anything. What happened? I asked, filled with euphoria.
Congratulations. You have upgrades. Despite how good you feel, remember that you're not immune to death.
I can see things in front of me. It's showing distance and calculations of things. What's happening? I felt ill and vomited on the floor. My body and mind were overwhelmed by the changes. I swayed at first when I walked, until I reached a point where the change was normal and my body adapted. Every so often I would slump in the corner, trying to gain a moment of rest in the chaos, and found my need for sleep greatly reduced. As I walked, my memory was also restored. I remembered the wars, the rationing, and finally the famine that gripped humanity, smartphones, the internet, all the advertising, and everything humankind had before the Federation made their appearance. I remembered walking inside New Eden with my parents, only for the war to break out. Then I was placed inside a pod, an attraction for the aliens who would come by. I could smell them before I saw them. The scent of death and the cocktail aroma was sickening. Through the glass they lay in small, huddled piles, in a large space that replicated the natural environment. They were human, but not quite. Their brow lines were heavily pronounced. Their hands and feet were large in comparison to the rest of their bodies, and perhaps they were a separate human ancestor that time forgot. They had severely scratched their faces, necks, and eyes. I wondered whether they knew what was happening to them. Were they more human or animal? I looked in at them. I knew I shouldn't be able to breathe. In order to survive, I had to be okay with them dying. Because of my actions, they were dead. It scared me how I didn't even put much thought into it. Perhaps there had been another way for me to go. The voice said nothing, no words of comfort, and I was left with my overwhelming feeling of guilt. I didn't care about the potential consequences. The labyrinth continued, leading me to another massive chamber. It spanned a great distance and was filled with a variety of pods. These ones were filled with that same fluid. Maybe a gel? All the humans wore their clothing and floated in the air. They were humans from throughout history. They wore clothing from different time periods, and looked as though they were lifted from their lives to be stored here. Ancient China, the Aztecs, Sumerians, the Renaissance, various dynasties and cultures from all over the world. Anything and everything before and in between. Cultures that had been long lost to time. What stories of a broken past would they whisper? They floated peacefully in their pods. Eyelids occasionally flickered and their limbs moved, dreaming. I didn't know what they felt, and I didn't wish to disturb them from their rest despite my curiosity. I left them to sleep forever in their chambers, and hoped their dreams were pleasant. There was a room with an indent circle in the floor, with 27 metal cages in a circular pattern with an entrance. All the cages were rusted. They leaked a thick, syrupy liquid on the floor, and there was a thin slit with the smallest tube inside. I looked in one, saw a human. At least, when it looked like a human without a skeleton. They flopped over themselves and I guess remained where they died. Their arms looked like they hadn't moved for some time, unable to feed or clean themselves. Their physical bodies were completely in the care of their neglectful caretakers. I walked to the remaining one. The heart still pumped in what should have been its chest. Bloody sores around the many tubes in his head. Looking closer, he had no muscle tone. Nothing. All the focus was on his mind and the function it could serve. There were long, bloody tears where his eyes had been, and the feeding tubes still cared for him. His body was bolted in, locked in place, and still he lingered to life, if you could call it that.
There I am.
The voice was almost sad. I didn't know what to say.
I have been like this for hundreds of years, more machine than man.
I kept looking in at him. I couldn't imagine what it could have been like. Would killing him be a mercy?
Time for you to move on.
I continued on my way before I found the section for modern humans. There were rows and rows of humans in cryojank machines, eyes closed, asleep and resting, completely unaware of what was going to happen. At one of the computers, the lights beeped, and I could understand the complex universal language of the Federation. The lettering was forked. Some resembled scratching, and others many layered symbols. Many languages rolled together to create one. The humans were frozen right before the world changed. Before the wars that reached their climax. The upgrade had certainly worked. I could read the available information, and I felt myself grow exhilarated by the thought of the future. The humans taken from when I was had our lifespan stunted. I would age slowly, in stasis, and I wasn't sure whether it would have been accelerated now I was out. The others were allowed to age normally. Thousands of years had passed. There were other programs that were created. Some humans had been experimented on to a point. They no longer resemble humans, unless you look closely to connect the dots. I was caught up in my research when the voice alerted me.
Press those buttons and begin the sequence.
I tapped the air with my fingers, feeling it move beneath them. The unfreezing process had begun. It would take time to complete. The scanners and monitors running to check the progress.
When the first humans awake, you won't need me anymore.
No, I don't see why not.
You will need to be around your own kind. Besides, I have lived too long like this, and I want to be free, even if that means being no more.
I didn't want to lose my only company.
It is my time to die. I'm happy I was able to live, even for a moment.
Still, I wouldn't be alone for long.
Thank you for reminding me what it was to be human. I have one last gift for you. This chip will help you rebuild humanity when you all escape to the surface.
He didn't need to tell me twice. I leaned close to the machine, pressed the sequence to begin the upload of the program, and since I had to turn my head, I couldn't see the progress or all the files that were uploaded. I didn't feel any different.
There. It is done.
I waited to see what the changes would be.
Go back, open the machine, and let me live for a moment the way I should.
I walked back, sobbing to the circular cages, and toward the only one still working. His one. He hadn't moved. I didn't want to lose my only companion. Dare I say my friend? I figured I'd have to push some buttons to begin some sequence. Then he would peacefully move on and rest.
Pull the tube out from the back of the skull.
I winced and shakily went to comply with his wishes. I didn't want to do this hands-on approach. I wrapped my hands around the clasp, loosened it, and it fell open. I had to twist, and turn it in order to get it off. I heard a crack and the back of his skull came off, releasing brain matter and fluid onto the ground. His human body wheezed and struggled inside, fighting the dying process. It didn't immediately die, and finally, it went limp. All done, I guess. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
With a soft beat, the voice was gone. Then I was alone. I knew it wouldn't be for long. I didn't have time to mourn him. I rushed back to where the frozen humans lay in wait. There was still 70% of the unfreezing process left to go. The waiting was torture. To pass the time, I walked through the lines and looked at their frozen faces. I imagined their lives before, their names and family connections, who they were, and what they could have been like in the new world I'd helped build for them. There was a loud beeping sound, then something burst. It kept repeating. System failure. I couldn't believe it failed. I sank to my knees and wept. A long beat told me every single revival had failed, and the other humans died. I stared at their bodies, cold and lifeless. The freezing water leaked out from the sides. I checked the pulse on all of them just to be sure, and sure enough, they all died. I was the last human. There was one final hope I remembered for my connection to the mainframe. The only thing I could do now was make the best of things. I couldn't end my life, my suffering and humanity with my passing. I took the laser pistol and supplies, what I imagined were MREs for humans, clothing, and a basic camping kit, preparing for my new time on the surface of the planet. I remember the small group of Stone Age dwellers who exist on the surface, who are now abandoned by their gods. With the information and technology I had, I would lead them to developing a new civilization. From the ashes of the Federation's grip, I followed the map along the desert pathway and headed toward the oasis in the ruin of one of the old world towns. The name long forgotten. I heard them. The interface told me there were 30 of them. They wore crocodile or some other reptile skin. They held stone clubs and carried slings, with a warning of 50% potential for hostility. I was happy to take the risk. I kept the laser gun lowered by my side. They crept forward, muttering to each other and pointing at me. It took time for them to trust me. Fascinated by my clothing and new adaptations, they touched them with their fingertips. Fortunately, the chip was able to pick up and learn their language quickly. Beacons were lit, and the rest of the remaining humans all came from the continents to join as one. There were celebrations. They were coming from the furthest reaches of the planet. Some crossed lands and others vast oceans. All of humanity is called to a central place. We built a city, a paradise. With the knowledge I obtained, I was able to give the best healthcare. We had technology without the pollution to harm us or our healing planet. We built a city with perfect balance with the environment and the natural world around us. Their lifespans were long, yet they were not immortal. I watched 2 generations live and die in the new world I founded. I didn't age like them. They tried to declare me their goddess. I refused this. Humanity wouldn't grow like this, and instead I had a temple built in a nearby mountain, where I could keep an eye on them, only guiding them as a priestess, instead to maintain peace and balance with the planet. I sat with a warm drink in the morning, watching over the city when I heard,
Mission. Extermination activated.
I screamed in pain, losing control of my limbs, and opened fire on the people. People who had become my family, friends, followers. They were so dear to my heart. I was greeted with a warm smile, before I aimed my laser at the first victim and fired. The red beam shot out, causing their skull to fall apart, and their brain matter to fall to the ground. I chased them down, killing indiscriminately, and when the final survivor of the massacre died, I brought it to my head and fired, then fell to the ground, bleeding out. I didn't die right away. Why? Silence. Why? Just tell me why.
Mission. Extermination. Complete success.
My heartbeat faded out. and I could have sworn I saw him standing in front of me.